Pleasure to meet you. Greg, good to see you again.
Great to see you.
Your documentary is incredible. I just watched it for the second time this morning.
Thanks.
Can you guys give us, or the people that are listening who may not know, a high-level view of who your father was, Andrija Puharich?
He should do that.
Yeah,
he's
sure.
actually more of an expert on my father by now than I am, because he's done so much research.
He was, well, you know, he was a scientist first and foremost. He was a medical doctor. He went to Northwestern Medical School, had a medical degree. But he started researching psychic phenomena very early on in the mid-40s. Because really the Northwestern, when he was going to Northwestern, that was 46, 47, 48, and he was interested in that all the way back then. But he was just very early on interested in psychic phenomena, the brain, the possibilities of the human mind, what can be done. And so I think he was just a pioneer of ESP, extrasensory perception research, and was doing experiments in that realm far before other people were. And of course, his life and everything he did, he went on to do way more than just ESP research, but he started.
He was working closely with Itzhack Bentov, right? He discovered Uri Geller. He was
Correct,
a part of the Stanford Research Institute, SRI. He was connected to all these people. Hal Puthoff.
Yeah. So he was very important, and he had kind of had his tentacles, and all that stuff. But I think what's interesting about him is that he was never really, I guess, famous, you could say, in the sense that people don't know, you know, like Puthoff and these other people are very known. I mean, of course, they're still alive and they're out there and they're talking, but Puharich is very like underground, I guess you could say. I mean, of course, he became much more popular in the 70s when his book on Uri Geller came out. But yeah, he kind of had his fingers in everything, but he was still very like in the shadows, I guess you could say. He was involved in like all this stuff from the very, very beginning, but he's not very known. You know, he's not like a household name by any means.
So, out of curiosity, what was so significant about, like, why were all these guys spending so much time in Israel? Because Uri Geller came from Israel, and there was a moment where in the film where your dad, Andrija Puharich, he says he was leaving Israel and they took a bunch of his stuff.
Right. Well, initially, I think my dad was doing research on many people, and before Uri, he was researching this guy called Arago, who was a Brazilian healer. And Arago suddenly died, and which was terrible. And then research stopped, and my dad was looking for a new research subject. Then he heard of this guy in Israel called Uri Geller. So some say that the CIA sent him on a mission to go investigate. I've always thought that he just did it on his own curiosity. But he went out there and went to see one of Uri's shows. Uri was doing performances, showing his mental capabilities. And so he just went to a show. They got to meet. He did some experiments in a hotel, set up some simple experiments to see if Uri was genuine. And he found he was in those small, little things he set up. And then I think the story you're referring to is then he left and the Mossad got interested and they started following him or whatever, So, but basically he discovered Uri and he took him back to the States to have him researched at Stanford University where, under lab conditions, they did tests to see if he was genuine, which,
allegedly.
Yeah, he was positive.
He said something like, I've seen you do stuff that any magician could do, but we want to test this under like scientific conditions or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to have it foolproof, so there's no cheating with cameras and all kinds of monitoring. And and that's basically when, Uri's career started. And unfortunately, that is what Uri thought it was a career as a superstar is what he wanted to be. Of course, my dad was more interested in the scientific aspect of it all. And
to your point, though, about why in Israel, I think Annie Jacobson, our mutual friend, she brought up the idea that the Israelis were much more open to the sort of spiritual aspect of this type of research, whereas maybe here in the U.S. they weren't as open to that, because Puharich at that time was very interested in getting into the nine, of course, and the channeling stuff. And I think someone like Bentov, who is really like the Israeli equivalent of Puharich in a way.
Yeah.
They were very similar. So I think he found a more open world there to explore the stuff that he was really interested in, that Bentov was interested in, whereas here people were just way more closed-minded to that stuff when it came to the channeling and the more far out aspects of that. So I think that, and that Annie theorized that as well, is that's maybe why he was going there all the time, just to like have fellow researchers who were more open-minded.
And Bentov was an Israeli citizen, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And an intelligence asset.
Of course.
Yeah.
Have you read his book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum? It is so complicated and hard to understand. I had to listen to it twice. Mm-hmm. The dude is just so smart. It's like the dude. He's seeing fractals. The guy's like seeing shit that like normal people can't see. Mm-hmm. And the way he describes like human like resonance, like the resonance of the human heart and the human brain, and like these higher levels of like the soul and like the higher consciousness, and how we're all raisins in this bowl of jello, and like if one raisin is vibrating at a frequency, they're all eventually going to start vibrating in that frequency. Like,
is that a scientific approach he has?
I guess, you can call it that. I mean, he had like in his book, he includes these diagrams and these examples of how like everything in reality, this higher reality, is resonating down to like our base reality. And there's certain protocols you can use to kind of like expand your consciousness to more. Essentially, it's kind of like a more complex version of the whole brain filter hypothesis, right? Like our senses are just filtering out all of the stuff that's out there, right? Just so we can survive and get through the day and procreate and survive. But yeah, no, it's just super fascinating that he was working so closely with your dad and with Uri Geller and all these guys. And then mysteriously in like the 70s, I think he died in a plane crash, right?
79.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, backing up, and this is something I discovered during the whole process of the film, like Puharich, there's this big question mark of why did Geller come to the United States? Because as you said, and as your dad said, there was some organization, like a parapsychology organization, that sort of got him a ticket, and he went just to investigate Uri. Uri says he's positive that the CIA sent Puharich, but in fact, I'm pretty sure it was Bentov who originally tipped off Puharich to Geller, because in the archives there's photographs of very early experiments with Geller where they're clearly in Bentov's living room.
Right.
Because it's Bentov,
really?
it's Puharich, Geller, and Bentov. They're doing experiments. There's Geller at a table with like a big black sheet over his eyes and some weird, monitor device or something. So this was really early on. And
you're saying this is before Uri came to the States?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think at one point Puharich in a journal or something indicates that Bentov was the one who said, hey, there's this guy here, you got to come see him. And that was the original connection. Okay. But Bentov is very known Israeli intelligence, like very...
Even very back then?
Yes. But
really?
Even before, because this was 72, I think, these pictures are from. But he was involved in this group of Israeli scientists who were very, very connected to intelligence in like the 60s, like the mid-60s or something. There's an interesting book that Bentov's daughter wrote about him, and it gets into all of this.
Really?
But he was like extremely... And what's interesting to me is later on in Puharich's life, in the 90s, when he was, older, he was kind of talking trash about Bentov, and he was some conference, and somebody in the audience asked him about his connection to Bentov, and he was kind of like laughed it off and made some sort of joke about how he was insignificant or something. So I don't know if there was some weird something happened between them. But no, he was super connected, that guy, Bentov, for sure.
That is strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder why that was.
I don't know.
Same field of interest.
Yeah. But there's a tape, too, that we have of Puharich at Bentov's apartment in Tel Aviv. And
Audio tape?
Yeah, and they were just kind of sitting, talking like we are, and they just had a cassette, and they were just talking about, like you said, all this stuff in his book, things like this, but they were mostly talking about Geller and how they could sort of utilize his talents and what could be possible, and you know, all this stuff about could his mind trigger the root of a seed to grow and these sorts of things. But gets back to your point. I mean, these guys were clearly super intelligent. They're not just these, you know, wacko guys sitting around talking about Geller. Like, they were really like high intelligence.
Are you convinced that he can really bend spoons and it wasn't magic? Like, are you convinced like telekinesis is like a real thing? Like there's some real thing happening there where he can look at a spoon and rub the air around it and make the thing bend. Like, are you guys both convinced about this?
It's a very good question because I'm not totally convinced.
Yeah.
I know it exists. I do think it exists. The interesting thing is there was this one point where Uri was doing a show in England. It's very famous. And he asked people, you know, on television, he asked people at home to pick up spoons and, you know, see if they could bend them as well. And the telephones at the BBC exploded because there was all these, and especially young kids, who were suddenly doing this. And that was so interesting because they were just being triggered by Uri. And, hey, listen, I'm sure Uri was able to, you know, to do it at some point in his life. I'm pretty sure he was. I'm not sure if he kept that power, you know, and I think maybe there was some trickery involved later on. That's my belief.
Didn't you say you met with him not that long ago?
Yeah. Well, to add to your point, there was this same show in England in the mid-'70s. And I think you know about this. One of the things he did apparently was inside a wristwatch, he claimed that the, you know, minute hand was going to bend. And it did. And this guy had a wristwatch on, and they clearly hold it like right up to the camera, right? Inside the watch, and the minute hand is like, you can find this, I think it's on YouTube, is bent. So it's things like that, I mean, that's such an intricate trick to like do, you know? And even back then in the 70s with live TV, like they clearly didn't stop. I mean, it's a whole, you know, running show. So that was really strange. I don't know how you would do that.
There's mentalists out there like Oz Perlman that can do crazy shit like that. Like you saw, he went on Joe Rogan's podcast, like guessed his PIN number on his credit card. You can see Joe was freaking out, like had no idea what was going on. Like,
exactly.
There's some crazy shit you can pull off with magic, and he, like, guys like that, those mentalist people, they tell you like, this is all like this is not magic. Like, we have these crazy tricks where we can do this stuff.
Yeah,
right. Everything's possible. Everything's been done by magicians.
Right. Exactly.
So there's always, it's, you know, it's really hard. And, you know, we were talking about this earlier when we were there, when we did this interview with Uri. And at the end, he did a spoon bend session where we were out in a parking lot. And the thing about it is Uri would always, you know, if he wanted to go bend a spoon, he would create a whole bunch of distraction. You know, he would walk away and he would, you know, be distracting people, and then he would bend the spoon. And I was always a little bit suspicious about that.
Going like, look, see, that's the apartment I grew up in as a kid, and that window, I used to look out that window, and, you know.
Yeah, but really? But then he walks away, and he's like somewhere behind a car, and he's doing it.
What?
And it's like, yeah, well, you know.
You didn't call him out on that?
I didn't.
Like, what the fuck are you doing, Uri? Just bend the spoon, would you?
Well, to answer your question, yes, he did do it, and my thought is I just simply didn't.
After he walked behind a car?
Yeah. Well, I don't recall that exactly.
But they had a camera right on.
Yeah, we were filming him the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't know how he did it. That's all I can say. Was it a trick? Perhaps. But he did do the classic thing where he holds it, he rubs it like this, and it kind of starts bang. I can't say, do I believe it? Not 100%. But
What's your thought, Danny?
I can't
think it's
say.
bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you enjoy watching our show on Spotify or YouTube and you want to be more involved, I encourage you to please come check out our Patreon community. Not only does our Patreon community get every episode you see on YouTube early, fully uncensored, and ad-free, but we're also doing Patreon exclusive episodes as well as live Q&As, and you can get your personal questions answered by our guests every single week. For me, being able to collaborate and communicate back and forth with our Patreon community every week has been huge. And this is my way of saying thank you for the cost of a cup of coffee a month. Now back to the show. I keep going back and forth. I'm kind of like you. I think that this stuff's real. Like, I think the telepathy stuff's real. I think the remote viewing stuff is real. I believe in extrasensory perception.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of fucking fuckery that's going on with people, especially people that are becoming like very famous, getting a lot of attention for it, selling books, that kind of thing. That's where I start to get skeptical.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I'll say about the telekinesis is you've probably seen when some people do it, like the tips of the fork will be like sort of twirled up, almost like a circle. Have you seen this? That is, I mean, I don't know how you do that by just kind of like bending it. Because even this woman, one of the space kids who's in the film, she, of course, didn't do it in front of me, but she had this bag of cutlery she claims that she bent, and the tips of them are all wound up. Right. I mean, that's that's strange. I don't know how you would do that.
Yeah, that reminds me. We had Dean Radin. We were talking to him the other day, and he was telling us a story of a spoon that he was able to bend using these tricks. And you remember who he said he learned that from?
No.
Yeah, neither do I.
I thought he was talking to Isaac.
Maybe he would. No, I don't think it was Itzhack. I forget. I mean, it might have been Uri. But Dean Radin's a guy who's been studying this stuff forever. He's like did a bunch of stuff in like the telekinesis parapsychology world during the Cold War, and he still does it today, scientist. And he said, like, using these protocols, he was able to bend a spoon. And he seemed very genuine when I was talking to him. He said he kept the spoon. He says he still has it. It's like a real steel spoon or whatever, or stainless steel spoon. And like, there's no way you would have been able to bend it without a ton of force.
Yeah, I know.
So did he say how he did it? Was it like a chemical? Or was it pre-worked on? Or
no, he said he did it genuinely through these telekinetic powers. Like he said that he was like just like meditating and like was like touching it, and everyone was able to bend it with this protocol. And that was the only time he was able to do it. He said he's also tried it like hundreds of times, not been able to do it. He's like, there was one time he was able to do it, and he kept that spoon from when he did it.
I mean, it is hard for anyone if you just get a stainless steel spoon. I mean, it's pretty difficult to bend it like that.
The thing is, and I'm sure you agree with me. I mean, I do believe also in the power of the mind is incredible. Is an incredible force. The mind can do so many things.
Yeah.
And this might be one of them. I don't know if people can repeat it like Uri Geller did all the time. So I think that, if you want to be on a TV show and you have to perform, you're going to.
Sure. And this stuff, like, I imagine this stuff you're probably not able to access this stuff 24/7, even if you can do it. Like, if you have some incredible ability to tune your mind to like another dimension where you can bend spoons and read people's minds, like, you're not going to be able to. I can imagine this like just comes to you on like whenever you want to call it.
Right.
Like, I'm sure when you're on stage in front of people and like you're getting paid to demonstrate stuff, like, you can't rely on the muse tapping into you every single time. You got to figure out a way to like force it.
Exactly.
So that doesn't mean that it's all bullshit. It just means that, like, look, if you're turning this into a business and you can't rely on it all the time, you have to figure out a way to fake it sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
So
yeah, that's the way I feel too.
Yeah.
And this goes for a lot of people that do.
So I wanted to ask you, how did you first discover what your dad was doing?
Well, the first time he told me about it was in 75 again, not 95. And he told me he met this guy. He came to visit us in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And he told us what he was working on, and you know, he said he met this guy who was able to bend metal with his mind and do all these other things. And that was the first time he told me about it. And then, you know, later on I went to the States, and of course Uri was actually living in our house at the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I used to play basketball with him a lot. But I was, you know, I was 15 years old, and I was still trying to figure out what the hell all of this was. And I wasn't a very easy believer. So, you know, it took me a long time before I could actually kind of...
Even when you were 15, you were skeptical of this stuff.
Yeah, you know, my dad was my hero. So I kind of was inclined to believe the things he told me. But I've always been very skeptical, and I've always, you know, tried to, you know, I need proof myself. I have to see it myself.
At what point did you realize, like, how like big this whole operation was that your dad was a part of?
I think it kind of hit me when there's this book called Briefing for the Landing on Planet Earth, and this describes the work my dad did later with John Whitmore and Phyllis Schlemmer with an entity called the Nines. Phyllis channeled this, and they'd been doing that for a long time, and a book was published, the Briefings book. And I read that book, and that really hit me. Then I really started to grasp the idea of, you know, there being extraterrestrial entities that my dad was contacting. And then I became really, really interested in it. And I started. But I have to be honest, it was only in '85 when I had a very serious UFO encounter myself that I was totally convinced, and all the doubt left me.
What was that encounter?
It's an interesting story. My dad was living in Devotion, North Carolina at the time, and a big house owned by the Reynolds tobacco family. They let him stay there. It was a big house. He had a lot of people visiting. And I was there for the summer. My sister was there. There was a whole bunch of other people. And there was two mediums that were also there. And they both had the same prediction that there was going to be a UFO landing at the house on a certain date. So it was kind of funny because I the day before it was supposed to happen, my cousin and I took up a video camera and we recorded everyone asking them, you know, how is it going to affect you? Do you think it's real and this and that? And we watched that movie that evening, and it turned out funny. We were all laughing about it. A bunch of us went out to the porch, just, you know, to sit outside and talk about it more. And I remember very well, I was sitting with my back towards the outside, and suddenly my cousin goes, "Oh my God." So we turned around, and there was this huge array of lights that moved across the sky really slowly, trailing the light behind them. And that was obviously not from this world. That was obviously, you know, and it had been predicted that it was going to happen the next day. But later on, we figured out it was like almost at midnight. And that moment, I was able to drop all my doubt. You know, that was a very, very important moment in my life.
So it just looked like a trail of lights?
Well, what I saw is like there was a whole bunch of different colored lights. Like I didn't see a shape, but I just saw like a shape of lights. And the interesting thing was that, you know, when something flashes by really fast and it leaves a trail of lights, just because, you know, the way physics works. But this thing was going really slowly and incredibly silent. There was no sound at all.
How close would you say it was?
Let's say about 100 yards away.
Oh, wow.
Over the treetops. It lasted about, I don't know, maybe a minute.
And what was the shape of the lights? Like, what shape did it form?
The form, it was kind of sphere. And it wasn't like a UFO shape, if that's what you're asking. I just saw this, you know, whole bunch of lights moving across the sky, leaving this trail. And, yeah, pretty interesting.
And it lasted only a minute?
Yeah.
And where did it just zoomed off, or what?
No, it didn't zoom off, and it just disappeared behind the
Just
tree.
faded away?
Just faded away.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question, actually, because I can't really remember how it faded away. So yeah, then everyone that was there witnessed it. You know, all we could go was, oh my God, we're all hugging each other. And if you have an experience like that, I can tell you, then you suddenly start to realize, okay, so all of this stuff must be real. My dad wasn't even there; he was sleeping. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I've seen so many of those."
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was really weird. So to answer your question, that's the moment in my life when I really realized, oh my God, what my dad's doing really has some validity to it.
And when did you realize all of the intelligence and military ties into all this stuff?
I never really did.
Oh, really?
No.
Your dad never talked to you about that stuff?
Well, I was talking to Greg about that earlier. My dad, you've seen the film, right? And there's one point where his house was burned down.
Right.
And he always, he was convinced it was the CIA trying to stop him of publishing a certain manuscript and putting out information. They had warned him not to do it.
Right.
Then his house was burned down. And then after that, he became incredibly paranoid. And he kept saying that the CIA was, after him. And he hated the CIA. I mean, he was literally, he hated them and was totally against them. That's the picture that formed in my mind. I mean, later on, people started putting pieces of the puzzle together. And apparently, I mean, I know he worked for the government in his earlier years because he had to go to the military, and obviously they paid for a lot of his research because they were very interested in what he was doing. And when he was in the military, he was assigned to investigate the paranormal. And so he had an involvement with the government. But if he was ever really on their payroll, he never mentioned it to me. All I know is he hated those guys. So but that's my experience. Greg really, dove deep into into all the material and came up with another conclusion. So
who was paying him?
Well, multiple different agencies, at least in the early years. But that's what was interesting about doing this film is like I would discover things that Andy, never really knew about.
Right.
Like, for instance, something that I sort of collaborated on with Annie Jacobson is that she had mentioned that he had gotten this large grant from the Atomic Energy Commission.
Really?
In the late 60s. Yeah. So what happened was I, of course, was like, okay, what happened? Was this real? I did a lot of digging and I came across the documents that, yes, proved this, that they went to his lab in the late 60s, Intellectron. He had a laboratory in New York where they were doing a lot of biomedical research.
Was that the Intellectron?
Intellectron.
Wasn't that the Round Table Foundation day?
No, this was late, I think, 68, 67. And there's all these documents of this guy, Paul Henshaw, who worked for the Atomic Energy Commission, who was involved in the Manhattan Project, literally. And he was the head of biological research or something for the Atomic Energy Commission. They went to his laboratory to witness an experiment he was doing with the TD-100, which is this hearing device that Puharich invented. And you see it in the film where these deaf patients were able to hear, using tones that would somehow connect through the facial nerves. They would hear, be able to interpret signals and voices, and he invented this machine that did that, and he demonstrated this for the Atomic Energy Commission, and they concluded that the technology was definitely real and definitely worked how he said, and he got this, I think, $300,000 grant, which
from the Atomic Energy Commission,
which at that time was over maybe close to $1 million, and that was in '68.
And
so,
yeah, there was the story of somebody who had like metal teeth, and they were picking up radio signals or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
They thought they were hearing voices, and it was just like the local radio antenna.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
That was earlier at the round table in the 50s.
That's how he started the Intellectron company.
Yeah.
Because he was working with his dentist, and he figured, oh, wait a while, this guy's receiving, he's got this filling which acts as an antenna. And then he came up with this device that you would actually implant in a tooth with a transmitter on your wrist or whatever that would transmit. And so deaf people were able to hear through this nerve.
Wow.
And I think that's how he started
Yeah.
working on the TD, the transdermal machine, right?
Yeah, that started in the 50s and went in through the 60s.
Right.
But that's one example of, who was giving him money. I mean, that's a fact, Atomic Energy Commission. But what's always mysterious is like we don't really know where it went, or how far it went.
Right.
But we just know, hey, they gave him a significant amount of money. And what happened with that or how much it was advanced, we don't
But
really
didn't
know.
they buy the whole project off of him? Because I know that at some point, we suddenly got a letter, I'm a millionaire. But he had sold the Intellectron company. He'd gotten rid of it. So would that coincide with that? You're saying it was a grant for him to do research?
Yeah.
Okay.
I could. I mean, that again, it just goes back to the mystery of him where I even though the research I've done, I've heard that story, I think through you and maybe your sister as
Right.
well, that they had sold the company, but
Right.
I don't really know. Like I never really found anything that would indicate that is how it turned out.
You got
So
a letter he told you he became a millionaire?
Yeah, well, I was living in the Netherlands. I think we got a letter, and he said, "Oh, I'm now a millionaire," or something.
Oh, wow.
Something to make him look whatever big. So, but the interesting, and this is going to come up a lot because Greg has done so much research on my dad. He's really, went and found all these incredible documents and papers and tapes and videos. He knows a lot more about my dad than I do.
What out of all of the research and all the documents and all the tapes that you listened to, Greg, like what to you sort of stood out the most, or like kind of like blew your perception out of the water the most? Were there any preconceptions you had that kind of like shocked you?
I guess it kind of goes back to this TD100 device because he creates this in the 60s, right? I think it was even like 65 or 6. It was pretty early. And again, what that does is it enables people to hear like tones, and they can decipher tones, which could have a message in it and so forth, and they can hear it. So I think for me, there's a lot of these tapes, and we may have talked about this from the way later in the 70s, late 70s, these channeling sessions,
Right.
where they're communicating with the nine, and they're usually a space kid is going into a trance meditative state and is receiving information from the nine, an alleged entity.
What are the nine?
The nine?
We can't just gloss over that.
Yeah,
We got to
you're
tell
right,
people
yeah.
what the nine is.
Yeah, well, the nine. This woman called. Well, actually, this all started. It's kind of interesting. This all started really early on. When was it? When the
50s,
Dr.
yeah,
Vina
53.
came into his
Yeah.
lab.
1953, yeah.
Was it in 53? Really, that
yeah.
early?
Wow.
So this Indian guy walks into his lab, and I don't know the details, and takes my dad by his, I think, index finger, gives him a story of his life to convince my daddy that he's, that there's something psychic about him or whatever. And then he starts channeling this entity that calls themselves a nine. How do they start off? We are M, something weird.
Yeah, there's all this weird
Yeah, and they say
symbology.
they're like the 9 principles of nature forces, something or other. And so later on, many years later, this woman Phyllis comes along, and she suddenly starts channeling the same entity, the 9. And my dad really latched onto that. And
How many years later was that?
Well, technically, it was Uri who
did he?
Yeah.
Did he initially? But he didn't. He channeled that entity called Spectra.
yes,
It was
but
Phyllis that did he channel did
He claims to have. I don't know if that's truthful, but he claims to have.
When you guys are talking, just try to like talk into the mic.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Yeah, so it was like a decade later. It was early 70s. The
Right.
first one was 53. So for whatever reason, all that time passed, and then they popped back up. Almost 2 decades later.
Whoa.
So that's
Yeah, and Phyllis was a very powerful channel, and the information that she channeled was very interesting. And she talked about Earth's history and the involvement of alien civilizations. And my dad actually set up a whole a company, right, called the Lab 9, which was centered around her communications, and they did all these trips, and I think it's in the film, right, that they went out to meditate a lot, and yeah. And
So what were the 9?
so okay. It's complex, but apparently they're a group of entities that are basically overseeing the universe, I guess is the simplest way to say.
Okay, so they're aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Aliens are like divine spirits.
More like divine spirits.
Oh, okay.
Because they've never really said, we look like this or we're shaped like
They
this.
had a
It's more-
spokesman called Tom.
They never said we're from Zeta Reticuli or
No,
anything?
No.
Okay.
They're more of like, and just an intelligence that can be contacted through this method of trance, and that they're out there, they're overseeing not just Earth, but the universe. They're overseeing what happens with the planet because it's all part of a cosmic plan, and they're making sure things don't happen and that kind of thing. But it's a group of intelligences is the best way I guess you could describe it.
Okay.
And they communicate through certain people, usually through psychic people. And for whatever reason, there's only like a few that they've come through. It's this guy, Dr. Vinod, the Indian guy in the 50s, and then apparently Uri Geller in the 70s, and then this woman Phyllis in the 70s as well. So it's strange. I don't know if there's some protocol that brings them through with certain people, or some people can bring them through, others can't. But apparently, like just through Puharich, he was able to get people to connect with the 9. And it's very, it's a total rabbit hole. Like Peter Levenda talks a lot about the 9, and there's tons of conspiracy stuff about it. But I think the big question, obviously, is like,
what is the conspiracy? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well,
What's the big question?
The conspiracy is just the when they formed, right? So in the 50s, Puharich has this psychic lab. He's doing a lot of psychic research, and at the time he was working or getting funding from the military, from the army. And again, we know this as a fact. There's documents. And this goes back to the CIA thing too, because he was corresponding with the CIA back then too. I mean, there's literally letters from Alan Dulles' assistant going back and forth to Puharich. It was nice to see you in Washington. Make sure you touch base when you're here, that kind of stuff. So the conspiracy is basically like, why in a research lab being financed by multiple intelligence agencies is all of a sudden a psychic making contact with this group of intelligent beings, and why are there all these very, very elite, wealthy, high society people involved, and why are they there, and why are they part of it? Is there some bigger plan? Is there some bigger idea here? Is this psychological warfare? Is this real? So it all goes back to that origin point in the 50s where they first came through, this Indian psychic. But, I can see why people would think the kind of conspiracy angle to it, but at the same time,
Totally.
we just don't know. And that's what's frustrating about, making the film and spending so much time. Like as we sit here today, like I still can't really definitively say, oh, this is what happened. Like it's a huge rabbit hole, and I don't know. I mean, there's this big conspiracy that, the 9 of these people in politics through the years have been involved. And of course there's the Gene Roddenberry connection where he came to a bunch of the sessions and was channeling the nine. So people think that
Who's that?
he's the creator
Gene
of Star
Roddenberry?
Trek. The guy who created Star Trek.
Oh my God.
I actually put out a video about this. On
We
my,
saw, somebody showed
yeah.
us the most fucked up video I've ever seen the other day of the creator of Star Trek.
He's
Talking about like his daughters and shit.
Yeah,
You see
yeah.
that?
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah, so he was involved. He went up to the Puharich's house and sat in on all these channeling sessions. So the point is there's this conspiracy that the nine...
Roddenberry did?
Yeah, we have the tape of it. I made a little video on it.
Wow.
Yeah, Cosmic Clock is a new page I started where I'm trying to put out some little tidbits of things we haven't used in the film. But
What's the conspiracy?
well, it's just this idea that because some, like the military, creator of Star Trek, all these people are trying to use the nine to usher in some new, new world order, a new agenda, and the nine are orchestrating everything. But I mean, we've seen, of course, there's Deep Space Nine, and you can say, okay, he was influenced by the nine, and he called it Deep Space Nine. But there's no real like evidence that the nine actually like did anything or really shaped anything or really changed anything. And what's odd to me is the fact that why is no one now channeling the nine? Where'd they go?
Well, we have a new version of the nine now.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole story, like, it parallels perfectly with modern stories of like UFO abductees and stuff. Well, not modern, but like if you look at, for example, Whitley Strieber, a guy who's his stories are insane, prolific science fiction writer, connected to all these spooks, and like his family was in the military. He was a part of like some crazy childhood experiments in the army in Texas. And you have guys like Chris Bledsoe, who, from North Carolina has these crazy sightings, and all of a sudden he's getting visited by NASA and like all these spooks and these intelligence people that are like tied into, like who knows how much misinformation stuff could be wrapped up in all that. And, and then you have like laying the groundwork for all of this. You have the whole Paul Benowitz story. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
Oh yeah.
Where like he was literally drove into like an insane asylum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
By Richard Doty, I think his name was, this disinformation guy.
There's a good film that just came out about all that called Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks.
What?
Oh, you got to see it.
When did this come out?
I'll plug that right now.
What a great title.
Yeah. It's Adam Go Rightly. He's an author. He's written a great books. He wrote a book about Kerry Thornley, that guy who was friends with Oswald and the whole JFK assassin. He's like a genius, this guy. He's an author.
Pull this up, bro. I want to see this. This is out?
Yeah. He wrote a book called Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks, which is like a very detailed history of the whole just UFO disinformation world, when it started, why it started. It's a great doc. They based it off his writing, his book.
Really?
Yeah, it's out now. You can find it. But here we go. Yeah, there's a trailer.
Okay, let's watch it. We might have to. They might copyright us.
Oh,
Again, if you want to throw the headphones on, you can hear it.
I thought you may have heard of this.
No, I have not. Go ahead, hit it, Steve-O.
Bizarre.
Roswell.
Alien bodies, multiple crashed alien spaceships, a government cover-up.
Dulce Base.
It didn't matter what base it was. It was all the battle of underground bases, and the aliens are coming in, and all this really out there fringe areas.
This is such a crazy ass story. My God.
Paul Benowitz was a scientist. He started noticing that there were lights doing strange things.
These things lit up like balls of bright light and just took off. Came up, went south, around the end of the mountains, gone. Who are they?
Who's this guy?
That's Go Rightly.
The aliens, we don't know what else it could be. We're going like, wow.
They decided to just encourage him with the outlandish ideas. One, because the only people that would listen would be crazy UFO people, and foreign agents.
Spooks or Kooks.
We got Richard Doty apparently purposely misleading Benowitz and for whatever purposes, which could be counterintelligence to confuse Russians.
More, to me, he was completely sold on Benowitz. And Benowitz, at that point, had become the paranoid.
Man, it's like, what a gut punch. Everybody in that room, including Stan Friedman, had basically been played by Bill.
I guess these days it would be more like that New York Times article. It just comes out of nowhere and just bang. Somebody's making an effort to push it through in the way that people accept information.
And how they're using UFOs to potentially cover for an intelligence kind of gathering, psychological warfare. And it's such a great freaking cover story.
If someone like Paul Benowitz is already there, you just let them do the work.
Yeah.
That's fun. Yeah, no, that's the craziest thing about it too, man. And that's the reason I'm more skeptical than ever about it, because like that makes so much sense. That it makes more sense that they would have been trying to use Paul Benowitz as because he was tied to MUFON and he was living in New Mexico, seeing these weird crafts flying above the Air Force Base. And then Paul Benowitz goes, hey man, I think these are aliens. I think you're right about this. And then the NSA moves in across the street, starts beaming shit into his like apartment, telling him that there's some alien civilization that ran out of water and they're coming here. And now he's going and talking to MUFON because like, and the whole strategy, the high level strategy with the military was pump this guy with a bunch of fake information that leads him away from our serious military technology. And because we know the Soviets have infiltrated the UFO community in the United States trying to get more information on our military technology. So we're going to like, you know, throw them off the path, throw them off the trail or whatever, and use this guy as like a conduit of disinfo. And that's the story as old as the UFO story is. You know, that seems to be the intelligence, the whole intelligence thing is like so intertwined in all of it. It's just like, it's almost like you are just going to spin your wheels if you're going to spend your time trying to figure out what this really is, because it's just, you walk into it, it's a fucking house of mirrors.
Yeah. Well, I think my takeaway, I mean, I'm a believer, or, you know, I want to believe, of course, but I completely agree with everything you just said. But, you know, at the same time, I just feel like just this idea that every single UFO sighting or situation ever since the beginning of time has just always been a cover for a military thing. And
yeah, no,
you know,
I don't think that's.
Yeah, I'm not saying you do. I just mean some people think that, and you know, then you got Andy, your story. I mean, I have no reason to disbelieve you. A lot of people, my own mother, who's the most, you know, sane, level-headed person, she has a very weird story when she was younger, seeing something. So it's like, you know, I just feel like there's definitely that going on. I think that's obvious. I mean, it's like a true story what happened to him. But I think, and I guess a lot of other people think too, like there's still craft of unknown origin out there.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's not binary. I think there's probably some shit out there that we have no idea. I think I'm inclined to believe that we have stuff that's unexplainable, that defies physics, that we like siloed some sort of physics back in the 50s, some anti-gravity type stuff that the public's not aware of. I believe that. And I also believe that there's probably, I think like the real aliens that are out there flying around, I think it's probably some sort of like prehistoric human civilization that like survived through time, through cataclysms and stuff, that maybe lives under the water and is able to like shield itself from us.
What about us from the future?
That basically that, yeah.
Right.
Or from the future, right. Right. They if they are that advanced, they could probably figure out how to manipulate space-time somehow.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. And speaking of like the sort of funneling away advanced technology and stuff, a crazy story you probably remember, it's not in the film or anything, but this story about Uri Geller apparently teleported from so have you heard this story? It's in the news right now. This guy, he's like a FEMA director, and he claimed that he teleported to a Waffle House.
No. That's incredible.
Can he bring that up, Steve?
Yeah.
This has been all over the news. So this guy, he's some sort of top FEMA employee or director, someone in the Trump administration, high up guy. And I don't even know the full story, but apparently he's been out there claiming he teleported from his house into a Waffle House or something.
I wish I could fucking do that, dude.
And so it's very odd, and it's all over the news now. But the point is, back in the 70s, Uri Geller claimed that he teleported from walking down the street in New York City to Puharich's house in Ossining and came crashing through the screen door. Here, look.
The Guardian. Top U.S. FEMA official claims to have teleported to a Waffle House before. Teleporting is no fun, Greg Phillips, picked to lead FEMA's Office of Response and Recovery, has said on a podcast. Put this guy on the list. A far-right conspiracy theorist turned he's a far-right conspiracy theorist now. Turned high-ranking official at the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, claims to have once teleported to a Waffle House. Scroll down.
Yeah, this is.
What was he caught in a Waffle House when it was closed?
On a January 25 podcast appearance, Phillips claimed that his car was lifted up while he was driving and transported 40 miles away into a ditch near a church. And in another instance, on the same episode, Phillips said that he was teleported 50 miles away to a Waffle House in Rome, Georgia. CNN detailed the deep dive into Phillips' past public statements. Wow.
So
he says this was a long time ago or something?
I don't know.
Hang on, scroll down. Teleporting is no fun, he said. You know it's happening, but you can't do anything about it. And so you just go, and you just go with the ride. And wow, what an incredible adventure it all was.
Well, what's crazy is that Geller, in his story, he says the same thing almost. He goes, you know it's happening, and you can't control it, and all of a sudden it happens.
Geller says he was like walking down Fifth Avenue or whatever.
Yeah.
And he suddenly felt like he was being pulled back. And the next moment, he was face down. There was a big hole in my dad's porch screen up high. So whatever.
They filmed it too. There's like Super 8 video of him filming this screen porch that's all smashed in.
Yeah, and then he smashed on the glass table. The glass table was shattered.
What?
And Uri was lying on the floor. Yeah, this is a weird story. And I mean, if you wanted to throw something through, no, it's not.
Just the aftermath.
Just the aftermath,
yeah.
If you want to throw something, you need a helicopter or whatever to actually make that happen. So, and Uri had a receipt in his hand because he had just bought something in some store with a time stamped on it, 50 miles away and like minutes before. So it's a pretty credible story.
Wow.
But my theory is they were experimenting with how to teleport a human being. I have no.
Who's they?
No, I don't know. That's just my crazy theory. Or
so Puharich was there?
Yeah, he
was at his house.
He was at his house,
Yeah.
and he heard this big slam. He thought that the furnace had exploded. Then
So
he
maybe
found
they
Geller.
figured out a way to teleport, a small object, and so they said, why don't we try and see if this is possible with a human being? It's a crazy theory, I know, but Geller, I think at that time, in a way, was sort of like a guinea pig to a lot of these types of experiments, I think. So
yeah, that's a weird thing, though.
I have no proof of that at all.
One of the crazy things about this whole story is that if this is some like deep funded research that the military or the government is doing, why make this guy this celebrity figure? Like Pal Putoff said in your movie, I think, he said Geller was maybe like 5% of their research, but he was 95% of their publicity.
Yeah. I think, it's just a theory, but I think it's maybe a distraction situation where here's this, again, I have no idea if this is really how it went down, but so Puharich publishes the book on Uri Geller in 1974. He writes a whole book about how he met him, how he brought him to the United States, how all of a sudden he started channeling the Nine, and he details this teleportation story and all these other crazy stories. If you recall, there's like a pen, one of their pens got teleported to a UFO and it came back, and they have proof that it came back. So
the tapes, don't forget about
the
tapes.
The tapes where they would record channeling sessions would disappear. So the only way that he could know what was said is he had to quickly transcribe the tape before the tape dematerialized and would disappear. This is all in this book that Puharich published. So you think here's a very intelligent doctor, scientist, potentially very military intelligence connected, was all of a sudden putting out a book which would do nothing more than completely discredit him and make him look like a total nut.
Which is what happened.
Which is what
that was
happened.
the
So
end of
then
his scientific career.
So
when
then
he published the book.
When he published
Yeah.
the book, the whole scientific.
So then they
Puharich's gone.
can say, oh, of course this guy's just did you read his book? He's crazy. He wrote all this crazy shit. Of course he's, so then he can go on and do whatever he needs to do. So the general public says, oh, he's that guy who wrote that crazy book about the teleporting. And of course we how could we believe this guy? And he can go right on his way doing whatever experiments he wants to do. Just a theory. But, you know, I saw this old documentary about the KGB, and it was really interesting because there was this one section where they talked about a tactic they use is actually to purposely discredit people in that way, put out false articles, put out things that make them look like essentially they're crazy. And so these people can kind of be seen like that publicly, but in the shadows just continue what they're doing. So that was in like a very legitimate doc on the KGB I saw. So I don't know, but it does make you question that book. And, you know, why would this very credible, very smart, very, you know, just publish that? And it was a huge book. It was a bestseller. I mean, it was.
Or would they intentionally, they being like the spooks behind it all, would they intentionally plant fake seeds into these people's, like Puharich's mind, and tell them things, knowing that when they do eventually write a book or blow the whistle down the road, they're going to have these fake things built into the story that sounds so crazy. It's just going to make him sound like people are going to think he's a kook, right? That's like my take on the whole Bob Lazar thing. I think that, you know, how he describes walking by a window and seeing like an alien, and they showed him the documents that said it was from Zeta Reticuli.
Yeah.
I feel like those could have been like specifically planted things along the way that they intentionally brought him into contact with, so that if he ever did come out and like spill the beans, that would be in the story. They would know where it came from, and like people would think he's batshit crazy.
I agree with that.
I think that's probably possible. That's probably one aspect of all of this stuff too.
Yeah. Well, something we were talking about that I wanted Andy to say is because there's this big conspiracy really about what we're saying, like how connected was Puharich, who did he work for, this and that. And, you know, we don't really, I mean, we have some documents, we have the Atomic Energy Commission thing, but there was a story in, I guess, what, the 80s, late 80s or something, when these two individuals came to your house and were sort of trying to recruit him, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, you know, that's the story my dad told me. I mean, I saw these guys show up and they had a heated conversation, and my dad sent them away. My dad later on said those were CIA operatives that tried to get him to work for him.
When was this?
The time he lived in
83, 84 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, probably around that time.
But
to be quite clear, guys, I mean, I'm not into the conspiracy stuff at all. I've always just, you know, thought like my dad was a curious scientist who's looking for, you know, answers to the paranormal, went to Israel by himself and, you know, met this guy and took him back to the States. And I'm not into the whole everything's a set up plan and everything's, you know, set up to discredit him. I'm not in that league at all, I'm afraid. So, but, you know, that's my take on it,
So when was this visit though, with the guys that he said were intelligence officers?
Well, I want to say it was like 83 or 85, but from what I remember, at that time, Puharich, his dad, was doing a lot of this ELF work,
right?
Extremely low frequency.
Because that's a whole different chapter.
Yeah.
You know, my dad really went into the ELF stuff. That's the reason his house was burnt down, because he wrote a manuscript called the Magnifying Transmitter.
Yeah.
He was going to have it published, but then the publisher, the manuscript disappeared, and then my dad was warned not to publish it, and then the house fire happened. But that was all the ELF stuff. I believe that's real, because my dad was trying to.
So the ELF stuff is all tied to like Havana syndrome and all that stuff, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But way early before all this stuff started coming out. We're talking like
Yeah, but
76,
the Havana
77,
thing wasn't that sound waves? Was that
I
extra
think so.
low frequency?
Yeah, they're beaming some sort of frequencies or something like that.
But the ELF is extra low frequency, which is like a really low bandwidth, and the Russians were experimenting with it, and the Americans were experimenting with to use it as mind control over large populations. That's basically in the theory my dad had, at least.
Okay.
And he was able to pick it up on his radio. He could tune in, and you could hear like this chopping sound, like a helicopter. And he was totally into that, and he was, focused on that for a while. But
how would you use these? What does ELF stand for?
Extra low frequency.
Extra low frequency. Yeah. How would you use extra low frequencies for mind control?
Well, apparently it has some kind of, what would you call it? It works on the brain, or it works on the physical body to make people edgy, or, it's just a way of mass. You produces the signal. Then there was big antenna arrays. It was not like just a small thing.
Oh yeah, the one in Russia is insane. Yeah.
Right.
The one in the middle of find the picture of the big ELF panel in Russia. It's like the size of a goddamn football stadium.
Right.
The idea is that certain frequencies can cause different reactions in the brain. So essentially, I think it's a very low frequency ELF that causes a sort of
it's kind of a mind control
thing.
Like
a trance-like state,
but very crude.
So like it makes you more receptive to things?
More receptive, tired, out of it, just discombobulated. Higher frequencies, which apparently they used in Iraq in the 90s, that causes people to get very agitated, very angry, very crazy.
Right.
And this is the idea is like, say you have a little, well, this guy that Puharich worked with, Bob Beck, he created this little, what he called a black box. And you could have it sitting right here as we are right now, and you can just literally go like this. And if it's the low one, all of a sudden you're, doing this. If it's the high one, you're freaking out. Really? So the idea is that this is being done on this type of scale.
Look at that thing. That's the one in Russia.
And Puharich became...
It's still sitting there today, right?
Yeah, I believe it's still there.
But it's dead now, right?
But this is one of the things that Puharich, I find, is sort of redeeming in the sense that he went out. I mean, I think you can speak to this too. Like he, I guess, proved that this is what was going on. This technology was real. It was being used. He wanted to blow the whistle on this, and they once again were saying, you can't do this, too much, etc. That's probably why the house was burned. But after the house,
so the house was burned right after.
Pretty much the same time
he wrote some manuscript about it.
Yeah. He was going out, he was lecturing, but he really, even after the fire, he went out and he kind of made it his sort of mission in those later years to just warn people, like, I've discovered this. This is a huge problem.
Yeah, he even made
people
a device
need to know.
protect you from it, right?
And what's the story with the house? What's the conventional explanation for the house burning down? What was the investigation? Was there investigation?
It was definitely concluded it was arson.
It was arson?
It was definitely arson, yeah.
Yeah, there's a police
and there was people in the house.
Report.
They tried to kill the people that were in the house as well, because they doused the front porch and the back porch with some very flammable liquid, which was only used by certain, it was a really weird kind of thing. So that both the escape exits were blocked. And there was like 3 people in the house. Heidi was there, right?
Yeah.
She had to jump from the second floor. It was pretty intense. And
where was your dad at the time?
He was I think he was in California at the time. Yeah. So he wasn't.
So
there.
they knew he wasn't there. They must have known he wasn't there.
Yeah, and I'd been there all summer, and I left 2 days before the fire happened.
Oh, wow.
So I always felt, they didn't want to kill me, thank God.
Do you think they were? So, who do you think it was? If you were to guess.
Yeah, well, my dad always said it was the CIA, but I mean, he could. There's so many agencies. What are you going to call them? It could be any agency, but at least it was an agency that was determined to stop him from getting this information out into the world.
Was there evidence in the house that was destroyed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the idea: destroy what's in there. But I mean, of course, a lot of it's saved because you have it that ultimately wound up with me. But
well, yeah, by
who knows what
by
was
course
destroyed?
of a miracle, someone was able to alarm to set off a fire alarm, which was in the street, and fire trucks came very quickly, and they saved most of the house and most of the paperwork as well.
Wow,
which was pretty incredible. So,
but it was clearly way more sophisticated than, you know, a disgruntled person who was there who was like, I'm going to light a fire. I mean, even the arson report details how sophisticated. Yeah, they blocked the doors. I mean,
yeah, it was professional. They said they could tell by the straightness of the lines where they poured the liquid that the guy had no nerves because they were perfectly straight lines, you know, stuff like that. Because you know, they're saying that it was a professional. It wasn't, you know. So I mean, that's real. That's real. And after that, my dad really freaked out, and he went in hiding in Mexico for, I don't know, a couple of years. And he was really, and after that, he was obsessed by the CIA trying to get to him.
It kind of got him paranoid, huh?
Yeah, but very paranoid. I mean, it went way over the top.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
And
that was
didn't
bad.
you write a book about a sacred mushroom?
Yep.
Yes.
Was that when he went to Mexico?
Oh, actually, yeah, here, look.
Yeah, this was recently republished.
Yeah, both of these.
So it's kind of interesting.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. I brought only the cover because I was trying to travel lightly.
The sacred mushroom, the key to the door of eternity.
See, and that was in, what is it, 59 when he published that, I think, originally. And so that was one of his initial investigations into the paranormal.
59, you said?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think so.
59, yeah.
50.
But it was written throughout
So
the 50s.
this was before John Allegro's Sacred Mushroom book, I think.
Yeah, I think we talked
This
about
was
that.
very early.
We did talk about this,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because he did all the research for it like earlier. And I think it just happened that 59 was the year it was published.
Right.
Yeah.
In The Sacred Mushroom, Andrija Puharich takes us on an extraordinary journey into the realm where ancient whispers intertwine with the pulse of modern exploration. The Amanita Muscaria, mysterious and powerful, a gateway to the unseen, reveals its long-veiled truths through his words, weaving past through luminous corridors of consciousness and awakening. Wild. So
the story behind this is he was doing trance work with certain psychics, and there was this one psychic called, was it Peter Herkus or was it Harry Stone?
Harry Stone.
Harry Stone. So he started channeling and writing hieroglyphs suddenly, and my dad, of course, didn't really know what was being written, so he started studying ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, and it turned out he was talking about this mushroom as a way to open up people to become more perceptive.
Yeah.
So that's basically when he got interested in the mushroom and did a lot of research into that. Went out to find. There's a lot of footage on that as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
footage.
Yeah, my dad made all these. He went to Mexico to film. What was it? Rites being conducted by Brujas with this mushroom, where the donkey was stolen from, and they wanted to find out who did it. You know, basic stuff like that. So they did this ceremony, and and then the Bruja said, "It's that guy, and the donkey's over there." Yeah, crazy stuff. But that's all on film. It's really old school, but it's very cool.
So how much did he start experimenting with psychedelics after this?
Well, I think even before around the same time as the mushroom, I know he was involved in early LSD stuff as well.
Was he connected to John Lilly?
Yes. In fact, John Lilly's the guy who does all the experiments with dolphins and communication with dolphins, and I know Andrija was interested in that too. But yeah, they were very close colleagues. Yeah. In fact, Puharich told some story about how, I guess, in Lilly's later life, he had some manic episode, and Puharich went and tried to help him and everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but they were very close. Yeah.
Yeah, he was on what, ketamine, I think it was, maybe?
Yeah.
Something. But he thought he was talking to aliens and shit.
Yeah.
Completely lost it. NASA funded John Lilly to figure out like interspecies communication.
Yeah.
And John Lilly was like, cutting open the heads of dolphins and like experimenting on their brains and shit. Like putting
really?
probes in their brains, trying to figure out like telepathy and stuff.
Yeah. There's a good film about him. It's all about this woman who was working in his lab with the dolphins at the time. It's like the first time she's ever spoken about it, and it came out years ago.
Is this lady that was fucking the dolphin?
Yeah, I think
I saw this one.
I think it was.
Yeah, the dolphin lived in the house with her.
Yeah,
she like filled it with water.
Yeah,
that's crazy documentary, dude.
Yeah, but I think to answer your question, yeah, he was involved. I don't know how deeply, but he definitely talks about in lectures about how the first time they started experimenting with LSD, he was involved with that, and he named.
That was in his army days too.
Yeah,
you must not forget that he was put into an army division where they were doing research into drugs that could enhance soldiers' abilities, and they were experimenting with all kinds of stuff. So my dad was put, obviously, on that specific detail, and I have these booklets at home, order forms with marijuana, cocaine on it, and he could just check a list to order all these drugs for his experiments. That's crazy stuff.
Wow. Yeah, Army Chemical Center. He was stationed there for a long time in the 50s. Yeah.
And so he was ordering all these drugs for, what was the purpose of it?
Well, I mean, it was for the military, so obviously they didn't want to turn their soldiers into hippies. They wanted to turn them into,
right.
You know,
they didn't want to become anti-war.
Yeah. So they were doing all these experiments. What's that movie with, I forget the name of it, where they're experimenting on, doing all these experiments on people and trying to make them psychic. What's the name of that film?
The Men Who Stare at Goats.
Yeah, Men Who Stare at Goats, right? Yeah. Pretty much that. It's pretty much that was what he was doing.
Wow.
Yeah. But that was because he was drafted. Mm-hmm. That wasn't voluntary. And when he came out, of course, he still had his research lab in Maine, and he did a lot of experiments there too. But I don't think he went on with the LSD or any other drugs. He was just mainly interested in the mushroom.
Well, the thing was, it was the oil of the Amanita muscaria mushroom. You take the oil of it and you rub it into your forehead, and that is apparently what enables the connection to happen, where somebody becomes more receptive. Yeah.
According to who?
Well, according to him.
Well, did he discover this like in Mexico or something, or was this part of like some tribal ritual?
I think it was a ritual, that he brought back and was experimenting with at his lab. Yeah.
That's bonkers, dude.
Yeah. And that's a weird mushroom too, if you look it up.
The Amanita? Yeah.
There's some
connected
people
to so many different myths.
Exactly, yeah. Some guy wrote a book about it. You've probably heard of this guy. I can't remember his name, but he kind of took on the mushroom research Puharich was doing to like present day, and he writes about it. And
he's alive today?
Yeah. What's his name? I'll remember. But yeah, he kind of like took the torch there and is doing a bunch of experiments with the Amanita muscaria. So,
yeah, well, there's that book Road to Eleusis by Carl Ruck and Gordon Wasson, and where they basically make the case that like all the Eleusinian mysteries that were happening in ancient Greece were like there was this thing that they were drinking, and it was somehow psychedelic, and it was like somehow related to like the origins of religion. And like if you think about like some of the crazy stuff that you read in these ancient texts, like it seems almost like a psychedelic trip.
Oh yeah.
Is it Harry Stone?
There you go.
Yeah.
Is Harry Stone the guy you were talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also
so Aldous Huxley was one of my dad's friends as well.
Really?
Yeah, he used to come up to the lab.
Mm-hmm.
No way.
Aldous Huxley held me when I was a baby is the story they always tell me.
That's a cool story.
Yeah, cool story. I don't remember it though.
There's a bunch of letters between them from back then.
So all of these documents and these tapes that you got, is this stuff that like would be considered like classified by the government? Or that they wouldn't be happy that you have?
No, I actually gave all of it to Northwestern University, and they're archiving it, and it's going to be public.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Yeah, everything I had.
But is this the stuff that you think that they were trying to destroy, or they didn't want to get out there?
I think they were basically, as I said earlier, it was basically about the ELF stuff at the time.
The ELF stuff.
The ELF stuff. That's why the house was burned
And
down.
all the documents and the recordings that you guys have that you were able to get, that's basically all the channeling stuff where they're talking to the nine.
Well, it's a lot of stuff. I mean, so there's stuff that I've acquired that wasn't in the archives of that you had, and that stuff could potentially be of concern. There's a researcher named Dick Russell. Do you know him? You
Sounds
should.
familiar.
Yeah, he wrote a really good book about JFK assassination, and he's been around for a while. But he knew Puharich really well, and he went to Devotion, North Carolina, where Puharich was living before he passed away, and he photocopied all these documents that were sitting around. Did I tell you about this? Because he basically went to his house, and the caretaker at the time, who I don't remember who it was, who was living with Andrija, said, it seems his days are numbered, and you should just copy everything you can because we don't know what's going to happen to it. So he copied just everything he could kind of get his hands on, and a lot of that stuff were correspondence and documents between Andrija and all these kind of people he was involved with throughout his career, intelligence people, like the stuff that I found. I told you the Alan Dulles correspondence was from that. Mm-hmm. So there's that stuff that wasn't in the personal archive. And in the personal one, it was a lot of the tape recordings. But, who's to say? I mean, maybe, because no one's really listened to it before other than really
you.
Yeah. Maybe, so who's to say that it could? I mean, I agree. I mean, I don't think it's obviously, I'm not like a wanted person here. I mean, but who's to say that some of that stuff couldn't contain potentially classified material information? I don't know, because I don't think people know what's in there and what's on them.
Well, you found a lot of stuff. I mean, you did some incredible research, and you found a lot of stuff in there that I never knew about. Yeah,
but there's references in the channeling tapes to Russia and different countries and Israel. So, who, again, it was so long ago, I kind of think, like, why would that matter now? But maybe.
Yeah, it seemed like from the stuff that I heard, it seemed to be very much related to, like, geopolitical conflicts, right? Like, this is going to happen. We need to do this or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. During the Middle East war. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, one thought too is, the idea of, because there's so many tapes that were saved, and I often think, like, of course they're your tapes, you record them, but it's kind of interesting to think that those were kept all these years, I don't know what the end goal of that was,
right?
Were they recorded to be given to somebody? Were they recorded just so he could have them? I mean, I don't know.
No, my dad was very scientific. He recorded everything. He noted down everything in his journals very specifically and with dates and everything. He was a scientist, so he didn't. He kept records of everything. Fortunately, because you were able to.
Yeah.
Listen to it and decipher a lot of it.
But yeah, I think to answer your question, I think we don't know. Maybe there could certainly be stuff within there that would be considered classified or would be considered dangerous.
But you think that the ELF stuff was the most sensitive shit that they were probably trying to keep under wraps more than anything?
Well, specifically when the house was burned down. I mean, after that, my dad would get all upset when he had a flat tire, and he'd say that the CIA was behind it. Right. And that was obviously bullshit. But the house burning down, that was real. And I only know what I know. And Greg's done a lot of digging. Maybe he found something.
So after the house burned down, you were already back in the States, right?
I was back in the Netherlands.
Oh, you were back in the Netherlands. At what point did you come back here to spend time with your dad?
Well, he spent a couple of years in Mexico, and he actually hooked up with a bunch of yogis because at that point there was a lot of channeling going on, and information had gotten through that there was going to be a world-ending event, and he had to gather these people and go to a certain spot in Mexico, and they were, that kind of stuff, survive the catastrophe, whatever, and. I was with him in Mexico for about 3 months.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was cool. I learned yoga.
Really?
Yeah.
What were you guys doing down there every day? Just hanging out?
Just, camping out.
Yeah?
Camping out and preparing
Living
for
off
the
the
end.
grid.
And there was a specific date when it was all going to end.
When was the date? Was it Easter?
I'm terrible at dates. I'm terrible at but listen, that happened like 3 times since I know my dad. We were, somewhere, and he had gotten this information that world was going to end.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we were
yeah.
preparing, and he was going to have to pick up the pieces and stuff like that, And now we're still here, and we're worried about, it happening tomorrow, right?
It was Y2K, and it was also supposed to be this past Easter. The world was supposed to end.
I've gotten a little skeptical. I've sat through many end of the world events, but and then he came back, and he lived in devotion for many years. That's where he eventually died too. And
where is that?
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yeah.
And were you with him in his final years?
I was with him once in a while because I was still living in the Netherlands. I had my life there, but I would come and visit a lot and take care of him. I would chop wood for him, but he was then still investigating a lot of stuff, but he got pretty sick at the end, and he had dementia, and he didn't do much work after that. He tried to warn people and he was making this watch which was going to protect you against the ELF signal, but that was like a business for him. I'm not sure if that ever really worked. So in the later years of his life, he didn't really do much interesting stuff anymore. So, and he was haunted by the CIA.
Right.
Did you find anything from those years? I mean, we'd go around and lecture a lot.
Yeah.
But did you find interesting documents or?
Well, no. Of course, there's the theory that his death was caused by, someone who did not want him around. And
how did he die?
They found him at the bottom of the stairs. Either he had a heart attack or he fell down the stairs. He had a big hole in his head, so it was never really determined exactly how he died. But
how old was he?
76.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you believe that there was any foul play in that, or do you think it was natural?
I think it was natural.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't really.
It didn't seem like at that age when he's not active in his research, it doesn't seem like they would be like trying to whack him.
Well, there is
what do I know?
There's a strange connection, which is there's a documentary called about Jacobo Grinberg. Have you heard of him?
No.
He's a Mexican researcher who was very involved in the same kind of stuff, telepathy, ESP. You should bring something up on this guy because the film's really good. But basically, here he is here, Mexican neurophysiologist. So he was very involved in this type of research, and he and Puharich were very close. And in fact, Andy and
this guy looks like a cult leader.
Yeah, they got together in Mexico a couple times. Point of the story is in January of '95, which was less than a month before Puharich passed away, this guy disappeared. And to this day, and if you watch the documentary about him, which is really good, they have not figured out what's happened to this guy. It's still considered like an open missing person situation. They have no idea what happened to him. And he was very closely working with Puharich, and he disappeared. No one knows what happened. There's all these theories, he was kidnapped and he's living in some CIA bunker and doing research for them. But it's very odd. And I'm not suggesting the foul play thing with Puharich. I'm just saying it was, if you look up the dates, it was like within a month, if not less than a month, that this guy goes missing. Puharich, dies. The Stargate program, which was investigating psychic phenomena with the government, that comes out publicly in '95 as well. Around the same time.
Oh, really? That's when that was released? All the information on Stargate.
So that was with the same time. I think, again, you can look at the dates, but it was that January, February, March '95. So again, I don't want to be the conspiracy guy here, but
no, I mean, those are interesting coincidences.
Just dots to put together. But I have not found anything when it comes to Andrija that would suggest foul play. No one's ever. I think one person told me,
he wasn't
somebody
a threat anymore. I mean, he was walking around in diapers. He wasn't a threat.
He wasn't a threat to anybody. Right?
Nah. So I would.
Do you think there was any sort of like secrets he may have held on to until the end that he may have never told anybody?
I doubt it, to be quite honest, because he would still go around and lecture a lot, and he would elaborate on everything he had done.
He was an open book, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
he was pretty much an open book.
I have a comment on that because in the film, in the beginning, there's a tape recording of Puharich that you hear, and that was done in 1995, which was the year he died. And that tape was recorded by Dick Russell, this researcher I told you who went to the house and photocopied everything. He went to the hospital and said, I want to get one last interview with this guy because, I think at the time Dick Russell was trying to write a book about MK Ultra stuff. So he was like, I want to interview this guy, Puharich, because, A, he's not well, B, he's very important. Someone needs to get one last statement from him. So he gave me that tape. And on that tape, he basically asks like the same question you ask, in a sense, like, is there anything you haven't said, or do you know things that should be revealed? And Puharich answers and he says, yeah, it's what I discovered of how you can channel and communicate with ETs using the Faraday cage method. And that's,
but was that a secret?
No, because obviously he was open about it, but I think there was something specific about a certain way you set up the Faraday cage that was
and the TD machine,
and
right?
the TD machine. That there was
the TV machine?
The TD 100 machine from earlier, the hearing machine. So there's some weird combination between putting someone in a Faraday cage, having them linked up to this hearing machine, and channeling and receiving information. There's something happens with that combination that he's claiming on this tape is a way that is like a, surefire way you can communicate and contact entities in other dimensions. And he says, this is the thing that the government was all over me about. And again,
Did he say that on tape?
Yeah.
Okay.
So was he out of his mind?
This is recorded.
Yes.
You have this?
Yes.
Can we hear it?
Well, I don't have it now. Okay. I mean, I can show you. But okay. So again, that raises some questions, was he just old, delusional? But or did he really see this as an opportunity to say one final thing like that? I don't know. But all I know is Dick Russell wanted to record him when he was at the end of his life, and he says this. And what do you make of that?
But that's kind of interesting because my dad never was in the hospital.
Well, he went there one time, I think, before he was let go and went back home, because you can hear the machines in the background and the dinging, and he was there with that woman, Marianne Shenefield. Remember that woman, Marianne? She was like a psychic that.
Oh, right.
She was with him.
Right.
So apparently there was some incident before he passed away where he had to go for a day or something and get an IV or something like that.
Okay.
So that's what I know. Is that true? Is that real? I don't know. But he's kind of admitting like that's the one thing that's real and tangible that he sort of discovered. And
the Faraday cage idea to me is so wild, because like one of my out there theories about all this stuff is that like all the technology we're surrounded by 24/7, and like the fucking cell towers that are around us and all the power lines and all the lighting and the electricity we're surrounded by sort of like dims our senses and like keeps us docile and maybe like shuts the door to any kind of like extra thing that might be out there that we can sense, right? And I think like my conspiratorial mind is like, maybe that's on purpose. They're just trying to keep us dumb and concealed so we can't, you know, reach a higher consciousness. And it's just so interesting because you hear stories of people going like the Amazon and like all of a sudden like their senses open up and they can like, just by listening to the sounds of the birds and the insects and all that, they can like detect things that they wouldn't normally be able to detect, or like sense danger in a certain way they could never detect in a city. And the fact that you can put somebody in a Faraday cage, completely shut out from all of that stuff, like technology and radio waves and signals.
You should build one.
It's just very interesting. It's very interesting.
Should make this whole room a Faraday cage.
That would be incredible.
Well,
we should do that.
Well, you know, some
but we
people
wouldn't have Wi-Fi, Stephen. Oh, he could hardwire your computer, right?
Some people can't handle that. I've heard stories like, I mean, you've actually been in your dad's Faraday cage, which is crazy. But, you know, some people can't handle it. They go in and it's so quiet that they just like shut down. They like can't be in there, but because of how different and just how off they feel. Because it's just so quiet. They're not, because like you're saying, we're so bombarded all the time that to go
but
that quickly.
I'd be curious to see what would happen.
Yeah.
Well, it leaves room for whatever other things that come through that are not affected by physiology, by our physics, the mind. I mean, that's obviously why my dad did those experiments in the Faraday cage, to see if people, you know, would get images through their mind. And that works. That certainly works because you're shielded from everything else.
Right.
So the stuff that's, you know, from a different dimension or whatever, that does pass through. That's what makes it really interesting.
How do you build a Faraday cage?
Oh, it's very simple. You just make a copper sheeted box. My dad used to put some, I think, a high-frequency signal on it, but I don't even think you need it. You need to ground it.
Okay.
It's very basic, really, but it has to be totally sealed shut, so nothing, no leaks or anything.
Did you ever go in his?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Really?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I used to sit there and meditate. It was incredible.
What was it? Yeah, what was it?
Yeah, very quiet. Like? Very quiet and very, you know, you feel like, I mean, I can imagine why people would get upset because you feel totally alone and isolated. But if you meditate, you know, it feels really, really good. So, and it was soundproofed as well. So it was really a very quiet spot to be in. But he did a lot of sessions with mediums in there, so most of the channeling he did would be in the Faraday cage, for that reason. See, the thing that is not talked about a lot is my dad was obviously also a very spiritual man, because he pretty much discovered that everything that makes psychic powers possible is the part of us that we call soul or consciousness or whatever. You know, that's the main thing that makes us what we are. You know, everything else around it is I don't know what you called it earlier. It's just, you know.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things that I think Itzhack Bentov said was that we don't have souls; souls have us, and we're like bodies are like carburetors for a car. Like a soul will change its carburetor every 100 years and find a new body.
Exactly.
That was that kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's very interesting to think about. You know, I mean, you know, what are we? We're obviously animals, but we're obviously also animals with incredible capabilities, and you know, the boundary between us and animals is enormous.
Yeah.
There's obviously something there that makes us special, and the soul is omnipowerful. I mean, and that's the thing that can bend metal. If you can, you know, if you can set yourself free enough to allow that to happen, which is incredibly hard. You know, so we are kind of imprisoned. Soul is imprisoned in the body, but the soul is en route. The soul is the thing that consciousness is what the universe is made of. That's what my dad told me. You know, it's consciousness. We're all looking at the stars, and now we're looking at the backside of the moon, and it's all very interesting. But he said the whole universe is made of consciousness. It's consciousness that creates matter.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, it certainly makes a ton of sense. And it's also very interesting how like young children are more open to this stuff than like adults who
Exactly, because we get boxed in by our own thoughts and by our own perceptions.
Yeah.
And,
they've already been hardened to the world and had their reality constructed for them. And like kids who, you know, they seem to have like more kind of like, you know how kind of like sometimes like a cat will freak out us at something because like, you know, something's in a room and you'll think like, oh my God, my cat's seeing a ghost, you know. And like dogs can sense things. Like sometimes dogs don't want to be around certain people or go in certain houses, or even if humans, I'm sure there's times you've walked into a room and felt like the energy is just off here, you know. Like that's certainly real with animals, it seems like. And I'm sure like a young child who has not been sort of indoctrinated by the modern world yet, or even learned the language yet, can somehow tap into that same stuff, you know?
There's a lot of children that have recollection of past lives.
Oh, yeah.
Which they lose very early on in life. But young children often have, you know, vivid images of lives.
Well, that was a big part of the research with the space kids.
Yeah.
This idea that under hypnosis, they would reveal this past life of being from another planet.
That was a big aspect of my dad's work, really was, you know. I don't know if you know about the Space Kids program.
Who were the Space Kids?
Space Kids were basically mostly young people, that's why they're called kids, that he would meet that would have certain abilities, and he wanted to develop them. And basically, he had them come together at his house in Ossining and tried to educate them and took them in the Faraday cage, did sessions with them, put them in trance to see what they would reveal. But basically, he thought these kids had extra powers or whatever, and he wanted to use them, use in quotes, educate them in how to make a transformation in the world of some kind. But this was also all channeled to him that he should do these things and get these groups together. I was in one of these Space Kids groups myself one summer. And, you know, he had people come in that taught us about our dreams, taught us about hypnosis, taught us about the soul, what we really are. And, you know, he tried to educate these young peoples. And then later on, and that was the Mind Link summer that I wasn't there, that I didn't attend, that you talk about in the documentary a lot.
It was basically this big group of space kids and adults and other researchers. They all joined at Ossining at his house, and they did this big Mind Link where apparently and I don't know if you experienced this part of it, but they would do, these sessions where they would go like days without talking to one another, and they would just try to tune
their minds. They wanted to literally link their minds for, what was the purpose? Do you know?
Well, the purpose that we suspect from looking at his writings and so forth is basically like, they thought that with enough people in a circle with all of their minds tuned to the right frequency at the right time, that could bring in a stronger connection to, you know, an entity in another dimension. And the person sitting in the middle was the receiver, so all the people around were putting the energy to that person in the middle. And apparently there's stories that it was so intense that the first woman who was going to be the receiver in the middle like fainted and had needed medical attention, so they had to bring in a younger person to do it. So those stories make you just question like, what's going on here, you know? Like, why would this be this hoaxed, you know, event? It just is strange.
Well, like, and then there's also videos of exorcists like pulling demons out of people on stage, you know, and like people, like you see the videos of the guy who who like goes attack demon or whatever and like throws this invisible force at these people, and their belief is so strong in like demons and angels and all this stuff. This guy is fucking convinced them that they have a demon or whatever, and then he like casts the demon away, and the person will literally fly 10 feet backwards.
Yeah,
you know, it's like the power of belief is so incredibly strong. You know, it's like what the mind is capable of. It's like almost impossible to comprehend. Like how much of this is just insatiable belief in something. Yeah, this. Look at this guy, bro.
I don't think this was necessarily happening in
But there's also videos of like Bob Larson, this exorcist guy we had on, who would do exorcisms on people, right? And like picking people out of the crowd, and like this young girl would like start talking in tongues, like Satan is like they're channeling Satan, and it's like, is this person really just acting for the camera, or do they actually believe because this exorcist is there telling them they're possessed by the devil? Is this some sort of like subconscious thing that's like coming forth? You know, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and it's strange. And to give a more concrete example of like what they were doing, the mind link and the group, the space kids, like, Puharich would often talk about this idea that he was receiving higher physics from these entities, and that certain people, like we talked about this woman, Sharon, who was this psychic that he worked with, who apparently was very, like much better than a lot of the other people who were there at receiving. And she would bring through equations and physics and things that Puharich, I think, believed were a higher form or a different type of physics that was coming from another world. And he felt as though if he could get more and enough of it, that he could write it all down and make sense of it and sort of usher in this whole new way of thinking about the universe and thinking about, okay, this is how the communication works between us and these entities. So a lot of times these space kids would channel like weird information, like equations and things that had to do with technology and weird formulas. And I think a big part of it was Puharich saying, let me try to make sense of this and let me try to get more of this.
Yeah.
But that goes right to your point, is like, and that's the weird thing about the channeling that I always thought is like, how is a 22-year-old girl sitting there and just saying, okay, I guess I'm just going to make all this stuff up now and just start saying it. I mean, it's possible, but it just seems odd. Like there's something else going on. I don't know what is it. A being talking through her? I know, right. I don't know, but it does seem like there's something weird with the mind and the people and the connection and something. Because I just find it unlikely. Again, we were talking like a lot of channeled stuff, I'm sure is bogus, but I just find it unlikely that a lot of these people, especially back then, the people he was working with were just like making it up. That's it. That's the answer. They were all just making it up. And it's some of this stuff, I just think even people who were around back then would say like, oh, this woman was no way she would be able to even like come up with this kind of thing, with all due respect, she's just not smart, intelligent enough to just make stuff up like this. So it's very complex.
Yeah.
So I just don't rule it all away with it's just people making it up.
Wasn't there some connection to Tesla? Wasn't he writing Tesla or something? No?
Yes.
Well, did I make that up?
No.
No. My dad was really interested in the work of Nikola Tesla and all the technology that he came up with. The manuscript we're talking about the ELF is called Tesla's magnifying transmitter. And the ELF, because that's basically what that transmitter was a Nikola Tesla invention. And Tesla, okay. I mean, that's, there's a lot of mysteries about Tesla as well. What did he invent? Did he take inventions to the grave? Were all of his inventions taken by the government?
Right.
And all that stuff.
Well, there's that whole weird Trump connection. What was it, his uncle or something?
Oh, yeah, Trump's uncle.
Yeah.
He was connected to Townsend Brown.
Yeah, and he took all these Tesla patents or something. I can't remember the exact connection, but it was either his uncle or something.
Yeah, it was his uncle.
Yeah, came into possession of all these Tesla patents that no one has ever had before, and he's the one who somehow has them now.
Yeah, he was connected. Dude, Trump's uncle was connected to like all these people in like aerospace research, including like Townsend Brown, who created this this propulsion called electrogravitics, which was like, I can't even explain it in words, but it's like basically, you know, it has a lot to do with like how the stealth bomber was engineered and all this stuff. And allegedly there's claims that a lot of it went dark and went like private into like the military, like black budget sector that doesn't see the light of day. Yeah.
I personally did a lot of research into Tesla. I even wrote a film script about him. I went to all the places where he worked and where he was born and where he lived.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I did a lot of research. And what I came up with is that, you know, obviously at the end of his life or during his life, he was always depending on funding, right? Because he didn't make any money. He needed his research to be funded. And what happens is, you always make the story a little better when you're looking for funding, right? Because you want the funding. And he was very dramatic. He would put on these big shows and he would, you know, display all these things he was working on. But a lot of it kind of never really worked, but he was just trying to get funding, so he kind of exaggerated his findings and the technology. And I think a lot of that's been blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I think that I've seen my dad do exactly the same thing. He was working on his water splitting invention where he said he worked on it for a long time. He was splitting water into oxygen and hydrogen, where, you know, you put in less energy than came out. So it's like almost a free energy device. Oh, wow. And he worked on it for a long time. I worked on that with him, and I know that in the end, the results were not what he was looking for.
Yeah.
But he was being backed by certain people, so he kind of manipulated the outcome a little bit. And that's when I saw how that mechanism works. You know, you're trying to get funding.
Right.
And you exaggerate it a little bit. Right, and now you can read on the internet everywhere that my dad did this invention and, you know, and there's a lot of people trying to copy it. And
it's basically using
stories
water
like
as
that
fuel.
get out of hand.
Using water as fuel?
That was the gist of it, is basically you could power your automobile with.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you split hydrogen into, water into hydrogen and oxygen, you have the best fuel there is, you know. Hydrogen burns with oxygen, and the result is water. Problem is you have to put in so much energy to split it that it's not worth doing it. I mean, they make hydrogen by electrolysis. I think that's what it's called in English, electrolysis. Electrolysis, right.
Yeah.
So my dad was inventing a way of using his TD100 device to split water in a more economical way, so you would get energy.
Wow.
And people claim, like, I never saw any evidence to this, but that he was driving around in his RV.
Yeah, well, that's the story he said. He was driving his RV around Canada, Mexico.
Powered by water?
Yeah.
On the water. But unfortunately...
It wasn't true.
It was not true.
Well, the big conspiracy is that guy who did invent some sort of water-powered car was found killed.
Whacked.
Yeah. Stanley something.
Yeah.
But I think, if I'm not mistaken, what Andrija was doing was much before this. He could have somehow ripped off, taken what he was doing and
hey, listen,
went
his
further.
research, I mean, it was really good, and I worked on the project with him, and we would machine parts together and stuff, and come up with new ways of experimenting. But the amount of and eventually we went to some university, I forget where it was, to have the whole system tested with machines that were calibrated properly, so you could get a real truthful reading on the amount of energy you were putting in and the amount of energy you were putting out. And I remember well how depressed my dad was because the results were not good.
Yeah.
So, a lot of stuff. And I think the same thing happened with Tesla. I think a lot of his so-called incredible inventions that were, never replicated were kind of blown out of proportions by him himself.
Wasn't Tesla able to create like an earthquake device
Yes.
that like resonated and could bring down a building?
Yeah, but that's
Was that fake or was that real?
no, that's real. That
was real.
That's regular physics. You can do that. You can make something resonate if you find the right
Yeah,
frequency.
I heard a story they were doing a test or something, like
Yeah.
in the bottom of a building, and it started to collapse on them or
Yeah,
something.
in New York. Yeah,
That was in New
true-
York. That was
that's
real.
a true story. Yeah. Yeah, and he smashed the device to stop it because he had built a device which was basically working by itself. I mean, resonant frequency is really interesting. That's what the TD100 device is about. You know, if you can get something to resonate in its own frequency, it's going to fall apart eventually. And you can, you know, I mean, it's really interesting stuff, definitely. But there's so many big labs all over the world experimenting with this stuff. And, you know, nobody's come up with a true free energy device so far.
That we know of.
That
Yeah.
we know of. True.
Yeah.
That I will not deny.
And that's what leads to all the crazy conspiracy theories, you know, surrounding Tesla, right? Because if he was able to create shit like that, that's not something you hear about today. Like, who uses a fucking earthquake machine? You know, what, I mean, I can imagine what it could be used for, like in a nefarious way by like a nation state or something, or like stuff like that. But like, how did Tesla die?
Alone in his hotel room.
But it was raided, right? That's the story.
Well,
That's true.
afterwards, he probably was raided by officials or whatever.
Yeah,
They took
yeah.
all his documents.
So is there like a conspiracy behind how he was killed? Like, was he, or just
You would know better than I.
He was a very old, sick
He
man.
was?
Yeah,
Oh,
oh, yeah.
okay.
He was really old, and he wasn't doing anything anymore. He was going out and feeding the pigeons every day.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of scenario.
Yeah, another, you know, on the subject of like how the truth can get blown out of proportion over time is I had this gentleman on the podcast a couple of years ago, Christopher Dunn, who wrote a book about called the Giza Power Plant. Basically how he thinks like the Great Pyramid was like some sort of a machine to create energy. This guy was like he was an aerospace engineer. And, you know, when he first discovered the pyramid and looked at like the inside of it and all the chambers and how it was built, he's like, oh my God, he's like, this thing is like this thing was built for some purpose and it had some function. Like this was clearly a machine. And, there he found there's a lot of theories out there that like Tesla was obsessed with the pyramids and people think that they were like a free energy device or whatever. And then he like dug deeper into it. And I think he said there was absolutely zero connection between Tesla and the pyramids.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, that was one of the shocking things to me. He's like, yeah, he's like, I've found no evidence that Tesla was ever interested in the pyramids or even went to the pyramids at all.
I haven't found any
And I'm like,
evidence
wow,
either.
because you Google Tesla and the pyramids, the shit's everywhere.
Yeah.
My dad was very interested in the pyramids. He was actually able to spend a couple of nights alone in the Pyramid of Giza.
Yeah, there's a crazy frequency inside. I've heard.
Yeah, he wanted to feel and measure and
We have the tapes. He like
meditate.
recorded himself in
Yeah.
the pyramid, and he did a channeling session with a
Really?
space kid. Yeah.
In the pyramid, in like one of the chambers, like the king's
Yeah,
chamber.
so they're in the king's chamber. He was with it was him, it was Solveig Clark, who was a woman who was I don't know, we would say an assistant or
assistant, and they were engaged at some point.
Yeah. She was like helped him with stuff. And so it was Puharich, her, and then this space kid who's this woman who at the time was named Anne. She's since changed her name. She's actually in the film. She's one of the space kids. But they went and they did a session in there, and they were trying to telepathically link with the people back in Ossining at his house. So the session is basically this space kid linking up with people back there, and they were exchanging information. And
this was recorded.
Yeah, and she was saying like, I can see them now, and what are they doing? And Melanie, they say everything's fine here, and they're communicating. Yeah. Whoa. And you know, his theory, of course, too, is like you're saying, because of the frequency in the pyramid, that is sort of like a mega Faraday cage effect, where it's just like, you know, the Faraday cage effect times 1,000,000 because you're in there, and so that made them like super receptive.
Well, you know that the pyramid was originally covered in copper, right?
No.
Yeah, I mean now
is that a fact?
Yeah, I think that's a fact. I'm not positive, but I think that they found that originally it was totally covered in copper, and of course all the copper was stolen over the years.
Well, that's really interesting because
you should look that up.
I heard that there were casing stones on the outside of it. I didn't hear that there was copper.
Well, because copper is the whole thing with the Faraday cage, and apparently the 9 in the early channeled sessions, the 9 would say you have to use more copper, and copper is the key to this kind of communication, and so much so that they would say if you're the psychic you're working with, they should put on a copper bracelet.
I built I was the one making all the copper bracelets.
Yeah, because of the copper's in connection with your skin. That's enabling the communication to happen easier with less better transmission. So all these people were in this little bracelet that had like a copper little rectangle that was connected to their skin.
With the crystal.
So I mean that pyramid. I never knew about that pyramid thing. But that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I can't, and I'm not sure if I heard this correctly or if I'm recalling it correctly. But I think. Can you look that up?
He's looking it up.
So, I'll show you what the AI shows.
Steve's an AI guy.
No.
Oh, that's cool.
It says no, but I did find some stuff about that the Egyptians did use a shit ton of copper, enough that it polluted their area.
Yeah, copper was one of the metals they used for tools and stuff. Copper. They had copper tools and pounding stones. Allegedly, that's how they built the pyramid.
Yeah, right.
And Puharich was also very early on talking about the pyramid connection, the one in China, Egyptian pyramids and these different ones around the globe and how they're all connected and that kind of thing, which I think is now being talked about a lot more and looked into. Like he was talking about that in early 70s.
I'm really curious, Steve, what can you find? Like, is there any known sort of effect of copper on skin? Like if you wear copper jewelry, is there any sort of benefits or health benefits or sort of like?
Well, don't you remember in the when the pandemic was going on? Apparently, if you use copper repels any germs.
Really?
Yeah,
I have never heard that.
Oh yeah. You never heard that?
No. Yeah. Have you heard that?
Oh, yeah. No. Oh, yeah. Copper, if you wear copper germs will not stick to copper. They don't like it. Huh. Tell me if I'm lying. I could be wrong. But I remember I made this little copper stick at the time that I would use to touch things.
Wow.
In the beginning when I was very paranoid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. But yeah, all this space kit. I mean,
copper is a really interesting metal. I mean, it has all these spectacular properties that have been used all over the place.
Any luck, Steve?
Yeah,
Find me a copper conspiracy, bro.
There's something about copper that's very important too.
Yeah.
Copper does not have widely proven physiological benefits. Steve's he's a Google bootlicker. He just likes to find whatever the consensus is at Google AI. Copper does not have any proven physiological benefits when worn as jewelry, though it is a potent antimicrobial and effectively kills most germs on contact. What?
Right. Yeah.
There you go.
A metal kills germs?
Yeah.
Why am I just learning this today?
I don't know.
Okay. Copper is an essential trace mineral for human health when ingested, aiding in red blood cell formation and bone health. The benefit of wearing benefits of wearing are largely anecdotal and not supported by rigorous scientific evidence. Pain and arthritis clinical trials have repeatedly shown that copper bracelets are generally ineffective in managing pain, stiffness, or physical function in patients with osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis. Skin health. Some studies on copper-infused fabrics like socks or pillowcases suggest that they can improve skin elasticity, reduce fine lines, and even treat fungal infections like athlete's foot. That is bizarre.
Yeah.
So think that the Faraday cage that was used during these channeling sessions was lined with copper. So what's that about?
That's interesting. Copper's weird, huh?
It's a great insulator.
Yeah.
Basically, not much can get through.
All right.
All our wires are made of copper
note for
too.
myself.
Good.
I think you guys definitely got to
copper. Shit.
I think
Wear copper
line your
clothes.
whole studio with copper, Ed.
you definitely
Shield
got
it.
to build a Faraday cage in here.
That would be cool, but I don't know the logistics of doing that. Is
It's
there any
expensive.
downside other than the price of turning this into a Faraday cage?
I don't know if
Well, you
phones
could just
would
build
work
one
in a
out
cage.
there, like a freestanding one.
Well,
Yeah.
no one's cell phone will work in here.
Right.
They don't have to turn them off anymore. That's cool.
Right. That's very cool.
There's a guy out there who I got connected with who's trying to replicate a lot of the Faraday cage ESP experiments, and he was wanting to see some of the early research Puharich did in his documents, because he was one of these guys I was connected with, Skywatcher, the whole Skywatcher thing. It was popular. It kind of faded out. It was like last year, the psionic assets.
Oh,
these
yes.
people.
Yes, I remember that.
It was a guy involved with that, and he was very interested in the Faraday cage stuff. And he was like, I want to look at the original design of Puharich's Faraday cage, and apparently he had money. And he's like, I want to replicate this and try to do these experiments. And I don't know where it went, but he was very serious about it. So
Interesting.
because that's what's interesting too. I mean, just, a lot of people, you don't see people doing these kinds of experiments anymore, psychic
But the whole
kids in a
principle of a
cage.
Faraday cage isn't all that complicated. All you just need is a metal casing, and if something is totally encased in metal, nothing will get through. And copper is really a good metal to use for it. But
I would love to see a Faraday cage sensory deprivation tank all in one. What would that would probably fucking teleport your ass to another dimension.
Yeah.
I wonder if anyone's ever done that, bro. And then combine that with some psychedelic mushrooms or something, or even marijuana, I'm sure would be nuts.
Yeah.
Because John Lilly he invented the sensory deprivation tank, I think, right?
Really?
There's a whole documentary about that.
Yeah, a friend of mine did one of those for the first time recently. He was saying it was just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
The sensory deprivation thing. Never done it.
Yeah, I've never done it either. But I would certainly be interested in it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in the Faraday cage channeling sessions, I don't remember if I asked you this already, but like how much were psychedelics incorporated into those, if ever? Never.
Maybe. I mean, obviously, people that showed up at my dad's house were using marijuana. I mean,
Right. It's popular.
Yeah, very popular in the time. And my dad was opposed to it, all. And but I'm sure it's been used. And of course, talk about the mushroom,
right?
And use the book.
And wasn't there somebody involved in all of this that was connected to Bell Laboratories or something?
Yeah, Arthur Young.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was his connection?
He was part of the Roundtable Foundation in the early 50s.
Okay.
So he was there at the lab a lot, and he was part of the early experiments. He was sitting in on a lot of the sessions. But, to go back to the whole origin of the Nine and the conspiracies, Arthur Young, he was married to, you might have to look this up, Steve, because I'm not sure I'm correct. He was married to Ruth Forbes Payne, who was the woman who Lee Harvey Oswald was living at her house, and he has some very bizarre connection to.
Oh, I remember we talked about this.
Lee Harvey Oswald, and so people think, this is somehow tied into the JFK assassination and crazy stuff. But Young was married to someone.
This is not in the film, this connection, right?
No. Peter Lavenda, that author,
he told me this.
He writes tons of stuff about this.
I was wondering, I'm like, this feels like deja vu. I remember Peter Lavenda told me this story.
Yeah. And so Young was connected to somebody who was extremely connected to Lee Harvey Oswald. And so there's that whole thing. But no, he was just like a new age kind of researcher who invented the Bell helicopter, very connected guy. He went on to start this consciousness research society in Berkeley and everything, but he was involved very early on. In fact, in some of those early channeling tapes with Dr. Vinod. You can hear him asking questions.
Oh, really?
And, yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
And isn't there some sort of connection with all of this and this, the Montauk thing? Montauk, New York or something?
Well, I guess like people, so this, the Stranger Things, the show is apparently based off the Montauk program or Montauk Project, which is Montauk, New York, Long Island. And apparently there was some facility there that was some government facility that was doing research with kids and psychic kids and teleportation and the whole Philadelphia experiment and the teleporting. I mean, Tesla had something to do with that, right? The teleporting the ship. Did you hear that story? There's so much about it.
I'm not sure if Tesla was actually involved with that, but it was
based maybe on something
Annie Jacobson writes about in her Phenomena book about the Philadelphia experiment, how they were doing crazy tests on sailors.
Yeah. That's what it was.
Like shooting them with directed energy weapons.
Second, I really have to go to the
bathroom. For sure. Yeah. We'll be right back.
So when I was trying to make this film, one of my first thoughts was, okay, let's try to get a hold of these space kids.
Yeah.
Because, at the time in the 70s, they were teenagers, but it was actually difficult. I mean, so Heidi was one of like 10, because in one of Puharich's notebooks, he had a list of all the people who were there at the time. So I basically just went through and was like, okay, Google, Facebook, trying to find people. But only a few of them were willing to talk, really.
Really?
And a reason the film actually took so long is that it really took a while to earn the trust of some of these space kids, because they haven't come out before to tell this story. They've never been public.
Was there anyone that you really wanted to talk on film that you couldn't get?
Yes. This woman, Sharon, which is a good transition. This woman, so one of the space kids, so this woman is one of the space kids that was willing to talk, and she's in the film. She's very nice. She was actually at the house during the fire. She had to climb out the window and climb down on the roof, and so she had quite an experience there. But there was one space kid, Sharon, who, if you recall when we talked, I was kind of hesitant to bring up a certain name of one of the space kids because she was so involved and secretive and all this. But it's this woman, Sharon, who has changed her name many times. I think back then it was Sharon Jacobson, but I know at one point she went by McCann, right?
Her maiden name is McCann.
Yeah,
and
McCann.
Then she married this guy called Jacobson.
Yeah.
Jacobson, yeah.
Yeah. So she was one of the space kids who was very involved. There's a lot of pictures of her. But a lot of the channeling tapes is her. It's her voice. It's her doing the channeling.
Really?
And so many people, and you knew her, but the point is a lot of people involved back then, the space kids and some of the scientists, like they thought that she was the equivalent of, 11 from Stranger Things, this like very talented, legitimate, real psychic who could do things, who could bring in information. So after a certain year, I don't know, 76 or something, she just disappeared. And a lot of people around, I mean, you can comment, were like, we have no idea what happened to her. We don't know where she went. We've never been able to talk to her. I went to great lengths to try to find this woman. I mean, literally hiring a PI basically at one point, because she's so important, because she's on so many tapes.
Yeah.
She was so involved. And I was like, if there's one person to get to talk about this story, to talk about what was really going on, it'd be her. And she's completely mysterious. No one's ever been able to contact her. So that's one of the people that, like, it'd be so interesting if she saw this film and saw this or whatever and came out of the woodworks.
Yeah,
but
Sharon, if you're watching, just come on.
Yeah.
Well, you met her?
Yeah, I knew her very well.
What was she like? What was so special about her?
I think basically what was special about her is what she channeled. I mean, apart from that, she was just a woman with a child, and I would go shopping with her, But in her channeling, she was, as you say, apparently she had all this scientific information that would would be channeled through her. That's what made her special.
Yeah, she was the one who was able to bring through this very complex physics, and apparently for whatever reason the other space kids couldn't, and she could. She was the only one who in trance in the Faraday cage would bring through very, very advanced information. And so Puharich is really like leaning on her a lot to do a lot of these sessions. And then there's stories that
How old was she at the time?
Late 20s.
Mid late 20s. But then there's stories, I don't know if you know any truth to this, that apparently due to the intensity of the channeling and the session, she had some sort of
I was there.
Manic break or something.
Yeah, she totally fell apart. We had to rush her to the hospital.
What?
Yeah. There was talk about negative energy, being influenced, and we were doing a session. There was a lot of us gathered around, and she fell apart. And my father was a medical doctor, but he rushed her to the hospital because she was dying, basically. Yeah, I don't know why.
Well, there's this idea that when this other channel, Phyllis, the older woman that he worked with a lot, there's this idea that when you get into the state to channel, your body, it's the typical, your body's being taken over by another entity, and basically you don't have control over your body or your functions because it's being controlled by an outside entity. So there's stories of this other woman too having similar, I don't know if there's anything that bad, but she would have incidents where she would, collapse or needed medical attention because she wasn't in control of her body while doing these sessions. So Sharon, she's one of the people that I was like, man, I wish she would have talked, but at the same time, it leaves this mystery now to this story of there's this one space kid who was the best of them all, who was just dropped off the face of the earth, and everyone, very normal, sane people who knew her or who were around, every one of them was like, yeah, I have no idea what happened to her, really strange. She just kind of...
How many people did you talk to that knew her?
Several. Several. One of the guys in the film, that guy Leon Berg, he was a guy from London, and he got involved, and he was just sort of a helper. He wasn't really a psychic or anything, but he knew her very well. And he was like, I'm going to try to find her for you. And it was really creepy. We did like the classic thing where we found this address on Google Earth that came up on one of these sites as her address. And we go to it on Google Earth, and it's just this like ramshackle, empty house. And there's, it's basically run down, and all her other addresses didn't come up with anything. So it's weird. I mean, I don't know what to say other than maybe she just wanted to distance herself, and there's nothing weird about it, but it does seem like she's making a very serious effort to not be discovered or not be looked up. So she's the one that I was like, man, that would be cool. But
are there any photos of her anywhere?
Many. They're in the film, yeah. She's got blonde hair. It's very pretty.
Can you find them, Steve?
They wouldn't come up on Google. There's nothing.
Oh, no, they're
Google.
only in your movie.
Can't find anything on her, literally.
Wow.
Yeah. Even this like PI. I mean, I don't know if it's like legal to talk about what a PI, but he was like, I'm not coming up with anything here. But there's nothing that would indicate that she passed away because, back then she was young. I mean, it's not like now she would be really old. She'd still be.
So she was in her 20s in what year? What year would that have been?
Mid
what
to
century?
late 70s. Yeah.
Or
70s.
what decade, rather?
70s. Mid to late 70s.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So that's a thing. And I don't know what, I mean.
So when she went to the hospital, what ended up happening? Do you know? Do you remember?
Well, they saved her. I mean, obviously.
And she was about to die?
Well, yeah, my father couldn't get her vitals back, so...
Holy shit.
Yeah, there was real panic. I remember that well. It was a real panic. So, yeah, but, there was a bunch of other space kids that were interesting as well. Interesting people, interesting abilities.
Well, that goes back to the, like, so you're gonna hoax, almost dying here. Mm-hmm. So there's so many things that happened in this story that, once you're kind of skeptical, all of a sudden you're like, well, that's a pretty serious event to kind of just have been, made up. But it all goes back to this idea that the body's being taken over, kind of like an exorcism thing, I guess, because it's not you and you're channeling a different entity and so forth. So she's somebody who, yeah, it'd be really interesting if she came out after all this, but who knows?
Yeah, like if they're
you could have her on.
If they're channeling it, like I guess they're channeling these. So the 9 are what they were channeling.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Siobhan wasn't channeling the 9; she was channeling some other entity.
Well, yeah, there was different entities all the time that would sort of come through that had various names that were very kind of sci-fi sounding. But if I'm not mistaken, the 9 were kind of they were above everything.
Head honchos.
So, yeah. So even if it was a different entity, it was
they were above the Rothschilds?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
They called me Tesla. They would always, no, seriously, they said I was Nikola Tesla in my past lifetime.
I believe it.
Yeah, no, I rejected it.
my son, my oldest son, who's 6, has a girl in his class that says she vividly remembers her past life. She was a dog, and she knows the name of the dog. I can't remember the name of the dog.
Mm.
Huh.
Well, poor dog.
Yeah. She came back as a human.
Came back as a human. Had such a good life.
Mm-hmm.
I've often thought of giving I have a 2-year-old daughter and giving her a spoon and, seeing if she could bend it somehow.
Could you imagine? She starts bending it.
Yeah.
What the fuck would you do?
Yeah, exactly. It's a good question. What would you do?
No, the thing I wanted to mention though is the Montauk Project.
Yeah.
So the whole myth behind that is that there was apparently this government facility in Montauk, Long Island, where they were experimenting with every weird thing you could imagine: teleportation, time travel devices, but they were apparently doing research on kids there, psychic kids.
Yeah.
And that was apparently the basis behind Stranger Things, the show.
Right.
And there's some guy who claimed to have, it's kind of like Lazar and S4. There's this guy, his name's Preston Nichols. You can look him up.
Preston Nichols.
Yeah. Nichols. He claimed to have worked there. So it's very much like Lazar. He kind of came out and he's like, I worked at this place. I know what was going on. I witnessed a time travel. But, it's just like Lazar. People are all over him. They think he's full of shit and stuff. But that was the basis of Stranger Things. But from what I understand, like there's really no evidence that this Montauk facility was real. Like I think it's
really?
Just all. Well, there was a facility there for sure. It's like a building. It's like you can actually go and see it. But there's really no evidence, as far as I understand, that there was actually this top secret program happening there. Whereas the Roundtable Foundation that Puharich ran was a very real place where they actually were doing psychic experiments on kids as far back as the 50s, because some of the stuff in his records, which we discovered, was that even back in the 50s, it was the Air Force Office of Scientific Research that gave him a grant to do research with these 2 twins that were apparently psychic. And it was, their father said, my 2 daughters are psychic. It's kind of like the telepathy tapes kind of stuff. They can read my mind. They know what I'm thinking. They're totally accurate. So the Air Force Office of Scientific Intelligence, they came to the Roundtable Lab and funded like research with these 2 girls. And this was like in the 50s.
Whoa.
And then there was another instance where it was another young person that came there as well and was studied. And so that's a place where this actually did happen. I mean, there's documented proof.
Wow.
Whereas I think the Montauk thing, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's never really been anything that proves like that. There was actually that stuff happening there.
What is your take on the whole telepathy tapes stuff? Both of you. Are you familiar with the telepathy tapes?
No.
It's these children, these nonverbal autistic children who are able to communicate telepathically, and there's like a whole podcast about it.
Yeah,
it became very popular. I listened to it, and I think that I think there's something there. I mean, I think unfortunately, like all of this stuff, what Puharich dealt with decades ago and what is still happening is just the onslaught of skeptics.
Beyond Telepathy.
That's his first book.
That's his first book?
And it's also been republished recently.
They reference that in the telepathy tapes a bunch in the first couple episodes.
Do they really?
Yeah, she talks all about.
That's how it all started. Him researching people that were able to do telepathy. And the interesting thing about telepathy is, of course, that you always need to
Mitch Horowitz.
Yeah, he wrote the introduction.
Right.
He's cool. Well, Danny, I meant to say, so my answer to that is I do tend to think that there's some really interesting information that points to that being legitimate, these autistic kids who can somehow communicate non-verbally. But then you've got, what was it, the mother of one of them? You spoke to her with the test and everything, and I think there's situations like that seem very suspicious and very easily debunked, and like we got into earlier, just people who are kind of getting on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
But and there was a good interview you did with her.
Yeah, and there's even, going back to what I said earlier about those mentalist folks, like Oz Perlman said that he can do any of the stuff that those telepathy tape kids are doing.
Yeah.
He said he can do it, demonstrate it very easily. And he said that, and one of my problem with the telepathy tapes is they won't entertain that. They won't entertain a stage magician going in and observing that thing happen, because their excuse, or I don't know if it's whatever, that what they say is that will throw off the energy in the room, and then they won't be able to perform their experiments.
Well, that's the classic.
Yeah,
that's my frustration with the whole telepathy tapes thing.
No, it was very, as a story and as a podcast, it was very compelling to listen to. But I think when it comes to that, okay, let's have somebody challenge this. And if you're not willing or able to do that,
right.
Obviously people are going to jump all over it. So I don't know. To me, it some of this stuff is pretty convincing, but I don't know. There's a documentary coming out about it. They made.
Really?
Yeah. It's coming out.
Interesting.
Yeah. So maybe that will provide further evidence of this, but I know what you mean. There's been multiple things I've heard that they've been challenged to do certain things, and they just sort of they refuse to do it. So I don't know. I've never witnessed it, firsthand myself. So a big part of the show is they have like the camera crew and the people who are working with these kids are all very skeptical. And pretty much all of them come out being like,
"What's the idea behind?" Because I don't know.
Well, it's basically this scientist who actually is very fond of your dad, Puharich, Diane Powell. I've had her on. Yeah, she's great. Yeah, she's super interesting, really nice woman. She's a scientist who got very interested in ESP and everything. But she had this. I don't know if it was her or the host of the podcast, but there's this theory that these nonverbal autistic kids have a way of communicating with not only each other, but with their parent or caretaker that doesn't involve, speaking, because they can't speak. And they basically chalked it up to like they're telepathic and they can communicate. Right. So there's this thing called the Hill that they talk about in the show where it's kind of like a mind link where all these kids meet telepathically in this area in some other realm, and they're able to communicate with each other there,
like some sort of interdimensional playground where all these telepathic autistic children go meet up in another dimension somewhere, mentally.
Yeah.
So what's the output? How do you measure that, or how do you read that? Or
they do experiments during the telepathy tapes interviews, and they filmed it. They have camera people filming it where like. They put the kid in one room, or I don't know if they're in the same rooms or if they're in different rooms, but they basically they show the kid some words or pictures or whatever, or no, they show the parent the pictures or the words or whatever, and then the kid is somehow able to like repeat it.
Yeah,
exactly what the parent is seeing. Like the kids read the parent's mind, not the other way around. The parents can't read the kids' minds.
Okay.
So they're looking at a board that will say a certain word, and the parent's back is turned, and you're the kid. And they have no way of seeing it, and they'll be able to, know the word.
But they can't talk.
No.
So what do? Write it down?
Yeah, they have that like a tablet or something, right?
Yeah, they have a tablet where they can like type or something. Yeah. Or I don't know how they do it.
But there's all these theories that the parent is signaling them somehow, or the parent is touching them in a way that's.
Well, one of the things that really kind of made me more confused about the whole thing was when I had Dahlia, one of the mothers of one of the kids on the show, and she was saying that her daughter was talking about like meeting Jesus or something, or like talking about biblical characters and angels and stuff in this other realm. And that's where I'm like, you know, these people are predisposed to this because they were brought up in this religious sort of mind frame, right? That was kind of like their family history.
Right.
So like how much of that is bleeding into what this kid is saying, or, you know?
I always find that really interesting with near-death experiences, that it seems, I mean, do you believe that that's true?
I believe that's true. 100% I believe that's true.
Yeah, I do too. But it seems like people that are brought up in a certain religion, they will always find those kind of images.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
So that you know, I always find that kind of interesting that there's some sort of projection.
Yeah.
So you see something. It's like in dreams. You see, you feel something, but you make a projection yourself of what you're seeing. You know, the way you were brought up, or the way you. So it's always a projection of your own. You know,
of your own beliefs.
Of your own belief. There's a certain feeling that you get from something, but you make the picture yourself. You know, it's like in dreams. In dreams, there's feelings going all over the place. Your mind just makes the images, ties them together, and makes it into some kind of soup that nobody really understands. It's interesting how that works.
It
even
is
after
very
death.
interesting how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
something going on there with the unconscious mind is somehow percolating up through all this stuff. Even psychedelic trips too. I've heard similar stories. Yeah.
I've never done that. I'm kind of like scared to do a ayahuasca trip.
Do DMT. It's only 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, but it doesn't last for hours.
I've done mushrooms many times, and I've told a lot of people I've had extremely profound, you know, on mushrooms, like really life-changing, emotional.
Oh yeah.
And I haven't done it in many years, but it's kind of, you hear a lot of people talk about, like, for me, it's like, okay, I got there already. What more do I need to take to, like, I already kind of experienced that. And
totally.
But I don't know. I'm not like opposed to the ayahuasca and all that stuff, DMT. I'm kind of like paranoid, I guess, about trying that.
It's scary. It's definitely scary.
You've done it?
Yeah, I've done DMT, not ayahuasca.
Yeah. Wow.
What happened?
Did you see elves and
the first time I saw little aliens in front of me doing ballet in circles.
Wow.
That's cute.
And one of the most recent times I had a full-on conversation with a tree in my backyard.
What did the tree
and
have
it was
to say?
like, I forget. It's so that it's like it slips away from you after a while. Like so like right after you do it, you have to immediately do a voice memo of like everything that's running through your mind right then. And I did that. And it was like something to the effect of like humans are only like temporary passers-by in like the world or whatever, and the trees and like everyone, like the trees know way more than we can ever know. And like something about like the nature and like the what's here on Earth and what has been here, like the plants and the animals, and some sort of like universal consciousness that the trees are all tapped into, and they see everything, and we can't even comprehend like the reality, and we're only temporary, and like they were here before us and they're going to be here after us. And like,
makes sense.
Yeah, it was kind of like, I couldn't stop thinking about it for like a week after. It was pretty wild.
I have a question. Like when you do DMT like that, do you just like come out of it? Like how does that, like, do you just kind of like come back and
it just sort of like, it just gradually wears off over a couple minutes. It lasts maybe 10 minutes max. So it's like all of a sudden it's just like you're blasted into like another reality. It feels like the first time I did it, that's the best way I could describe what dying would probably be like. Because I feel like my soul sort of ejected out the top of my head. And I was just like shuttling through like a highway of light, like arteries.
Oh, really?
Like arteries made of light and like fractals and things like that. And like I literally felt my physical body being left behind. And like everything I know, every possession I have, every person I've ever met, just like leaving that all behind and like entering a new dimension that was just my soul, like completely disconnected from physical reality.
Wow.
And yeah, it was bonkers, dude. Jeez. Every time I've done it, it's been a different experience.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting to me is you had him on, right? Andrew Gallimore.
Yeah.
He's super interesting.
Yeah,
he does a bunch of research about this idea that like whenever you take DMT or enter this other dimension and people can access that dimension and
he does an extended state DMT where he puts people on IV drips of it so he can stay there for longer.
Yeah.
And try to like map out whatever that realm is.
Yeah.
I did it once, and to my disappointment, I just wound up in this dome, pure geometric form. You know, the six, what is it called? The 6-corner shape. And that was it. And I was stuck there, and that's all I saw. And when I opened my eyes, I was still like half in there. But that was it. Pure geometric. And that I found so weird. That was the least thing I would expect.
One of the craziest things for me too was the audio. Like their sound. It's not just visual hallucinations. It's like this type sound that just takes over.
Huh.
It's like this weird thing. Unexplainable.
Yeah.
Now I want to try it, I guess.
Yeah, man.
Oh, you're going to have to do it someday. You're young.
Yeah. Jeez.
Well, cool, man. Thank you guys for doing this. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, man.
Tell people about your documentary.
Mind Traveler. It's called Mind Traveler. It's going to be out this summer, and you can buy it, you can rent it, Amazon, iTunes, etc. And yeah, we're going to have a trailer done, definitely for sure, like this week, so we can
cool.
We can get that to you.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Mind Traveler. Yeah, long time coming. Very excited about it. I think it's
fantastic documentary, man. Very well done.
Thank you very much.
Big
Appreciate
fan.
it. Thanks, man.
Cool. All right, Andy, thank you. This has been fun.
Yeah, welcome.
All right, guys.
Good to be here.
Good.
Good night, world.